call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please bow your heads for a moment of silence. Thank you. Council, does anyone have any additions or deletions for this agenda?
I do not have any. I would make a motion to approve the agenda for the January 19th regular town council meeting as presented.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. And have you had a chance to review the consent agenda?
Yes?
Any comments
Yes.
on this?
Move to
Okay.
approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Katie, do we have anyone signed up for the first public comment period? Okay.
Nobody signed up.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any mail-ins or anything like that?
I don't think so. At this time, I'd like to ask John Frank to come forward with our audit results.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. Appreciate you allowing me to come by this evening to present the fiscal 2020 audit report. Each of you should have received a copy of the bound financial statements for the year. You also should have received a separate report to the town council, as well as a one-page financial summary. So hopefully everybody's received those documents and has had a chance to review them. As a result of our audit this year, the town received an unmodified audit opinion or clean audit opinion. That's the highest form of assurance that can be given as a result of an audit. Basically means your financial statements are materially correct, and we had no findings or other matters regarding internal controls to report. Additionally, the town received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting again this year. So that's a great achievement, which the town's finance office has earned for many years in a row now. We were also required to perform a separate single audit this year of federal grant funds related to the federal sidewalk grants received from the DOT since they were in excess of $750,000 this year. So as a result of this single audit over grants, we didn't identify any question cost or other deficiencies or other matters to report. If you could, please direct your attention to the one-page financial summary. I'd just like to point out a few items here. This is a comparison of some financial information between fiscal 2020 and fiscal 19. If you could look at Roman numeral 1, here we've shown the town's cash and investment balances at the end of each fiscal year. Overall cash was down $349,000 at the end of the fiscal year. We've shown cash and investment balances presented by funds, the general fund, other governmental funds, and the water sewer fund. General fund cash year over year was down this year. This decrease was primarily due to advances that were made from the general fund to the Sidewalks Capital Project Fund that will be repaid when grant revenues are received in the Capital Projects Fund. So that was just really a temporary decrease. Probably as of now, a good deal of that advance has been paid, but that's something kind of noteworthy this year that explains the decrease in cash and decrease in fund balance in the general fund. Water and sewer fund cash investments were up about $1.2 million. It's primarily the result of some delays in capital projects, such as the Main Street sewer line project. Under Roman numeral 2, we've shown available fund balance in the town's general fund is calculated under the Department of State Treasurer's formula. This represents the portion of fund balance that's legally available for appropriation. And under Roman numeral 2, we've shown remaining fund balance after restrictions and after the town's fund balance policy. Available fund balance is down about $1.6 million this year. And remaining fund balance is down about $2.4 million. And again, this is due to those temporary advances that were made as of the end of the year. So it's nothing to be alarmed about. It's just a kind of a timing issue. Under Roman numeral 4, we've shown a summary of the town's general fund revenues between fiscal 2020 and fiscal 2019. Overall, general fund revenues were virtually unchanged between fiscal 19 and 20. As you can see, ad valorem taxes were up about $107,000 this year due to an increase in the total valuation and the tax rate. Services and fees were down about $186,000 this year, primarily due to the impact of the pandemic and the shutdown of the town's golf course and grill for a period of time. Proceeds from installment financing, you can see where those are up this year. That's due to new debt that was issued for the purchase of the knuckle boom truck. And under Roman numeral 5, we've summarized general fund expenditures for both years. You can see that expenditures were up about $171,000 from last year. Increase is primarily due to contracted services, professional services related to the update of the town's comprehensive plan. Debt service expenditures were down about $26,000 this year due to the garbage truck debt being paid off this year and the debt payments on the new debt for the truck you purchased didn't start until fiscal 2021. And under Roman numeral 6, we've shown the percentage of available fund balance to expenditures for the current and prior years. You can see the percentage this year is 59.57%, which is down from 103% last year. Again, for those same reasons related to advances that were made out of the general fund. The state minimum is 8%, so you're still well over the state minimum, and you're not far off from the comparable percentage of 77% for similar sized municipalities. Then under Roman numeral 7, we've shown the change in net position for the water and sewer fund. Net position increased by $1.3 million this year as a result of revenues exceeding expenditures, and that was an improvement of about $80,000 over the prior year, which probably demonstrates that water and sewer revenues weren't adversely impacted by the pandemic this year. Then in Roman numerals 8 and 9, we've shown some stats on the town's property taxes. See that uncollected property taxes at the end of the year remain very low, and close to 100% of the current year property tax levy was collected. We also issued a separate report to the town council. This report summarizes items that we're required to report to this board as part of the audit. Pleased to report there are no negative items to report here. There were no significant audit findings, no difficulties encountered during the audit, no material adjustments. So overall, a very good job by Judy and her team and the town staff, and we appreciate their assistance in completing the audit. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have about this year's audit.
Anyone have any questions?
I do not.
Thank you so much. We appreciate
you.
your time.
Okay, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Chief Carson, would you give us our fire department report?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Derek Carson, Interim Fire Chief for the Pinecroft Sedgefield Fire Department. Tonight I'll be presenting our annual report, our 2020 report on Jamestown and some overall statistics from our department in general. So we'll be going over some of that and kind of break down as it relates to Jamestown Station 46 directly. We always like to put this slide in here, just to kind of, as a reminder of where we started with the merger of Jamestown. So in 2003, Pinecroft Sedgefield merged with Jamestown and started providing fire service to the district here. And so we've been going close to 17 years now in the town of Jamestown. So we're proud of that partnership and of where it's come over those years. Pinecroft Sedgefield is comprised of our board of directors and then the fire chief, administrative assistant. We have 2 division chiefs, 3 captains, 9 lieutenants, 34 career firefighters, 7 volunteers, and 4 residents. Put in an organizational chart to kind of show what, as far as the umbrella of Pinecroft Sedgefield, and all these benefits benefit Jamestown as well. So the fire chief, and then the 2 division chiefs over 2 different divisions of operations, and also our logistics and facilities, as well as our training. We have an 8 to 5 maintenance officer that's over our maintenance and our fleet, and also our facilities. And all these people operate out of Jamestown as well, as far as when things arise with the town and different things too. And then on shift below those are, we have a shift commander that is a 24-hour on-call officer within the district that's always on call and responds out of our headquarters station, Bishop Road, and then the 5 stations that we operate out of. So as you can see on the map, we operate out of 5 stations that bordered Greensboro, High Point, Pleasant Garden, and the Guilford-Randolph County line, serving a population of about 27,000 residents within those 5 districts, 5 stations. Our current operating budget is $4.2 million, with $680,000 coming from the town of Jamestown, the contract for the fire service in Jamestown. Our current ISO rating, we were re-rated a couple years ago, and lowered the rating in Jamestown from a Class 5 to a Class 2. And so that's what our current class rating, ISO rating here is in Greensboro, with a 3 overall in the outside of the town limits of Jamestown for the rest of our fire district. So for those that aren't aware, the insurance rating is how the premiums are classified and adjusted. And so when we had that rating decrease a couple years ago, the commercial businesses in the town of Jamestown saw a significant decrease in their insurance rating as a result of that. Here at Station 46, Station 46 has 3 firefighters, 1 being an officer that are here 24/7 at this fire station next door, 1 lieutenant and 2 officers that respond on a single engine out of that station. So we also have a partnership with GTCC through the academy over there. And so we have resident firefighters that live in the fire station over here. Some of those are here for at least 6 months, and then some may be here longer than 6 months. So when they're in the fire academy, a lot of those are out of town, out of state, and so they'll come in as a full-time live-in resident with us. It increases our manpower and staffing during the days and in the evenings, but it also gives them a chance to build up their experience level as well. And a lot of times, those residents end up sticking around and becoming full-time firefighters or volunteers with us. In the town of Jamestown over 2020, so obviously we dealt with COVID, and in March we got hit with the pandemic, and all of our stuff adjusted and changed as a result of that. So a lot of our numbers are down for 2020, primarily our fire prevention numbers, because we couldn't get in the schools. And that's where the majority of our numbers are throughout the year, is our contacts that we're able to have with the kids in all the elementary schools and in the high schools and middle schools here in Jamestown. So we have a lot of schools in our district that are primarily here in Jamestown. So we did miss out on that. So we had to get creative on what we could do. And so we did some stuff with some online remote stuff with the teachers, and we're able to do some stuff that way to kind of pre-record some things and get some things out. So we still were able to make contact. And one other thing that we did this year was put a banner up out in front of the fire station with the COVID stuff, to try and raise some more awareness on that aspect, and we're able to reach some more people that way that potentially otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do. So we did deliver 13 programs reached 462 adults and children in the town, 14 hours from staff, and 6 smoke alarms. So on the topic of smoke alarms, we do provide smoke alarms free of charge within the district for residents that may need those. So for anybody watching or anybody that sees this that needs smoke alarms in their homes, right now the supply is down with everything, but we'll do our best to get what we need to be able to put a working smoke alarm in every house in the district, and that's our goal, is to do that. And once we can get through COVID to get back to where we can do smoke alarm canvassing out in the neighborhoods, we'll get back to that. But anybody that needs one can contact us directly or the town, and the town can push it to the right resources for the residents to be able to get that. So our firefighters, for the year, again, training was something that we had to do different because we had to not have full training classes to where we had to split things up amongst stations and shifts, where otherwise we would typically all get together and do training. So overall, our training numbers are down a little bit. We did offer 600 classes within our department, 2,051 class hours, with a total number of 9,195 training hours as a department for the staff. We also send our staff to outside training classes. Some of these are North Carolina Firefighter Survival Schools, High Angle Rescue School, Advanced Extrication School, and so a lot of this stuff is sponsored by us that we send them to and pay for. Other things are classes that they may find at different community colleges, but we're fortunate to have Guilford Tech within our district, and so a lot of that stuff we're able to get right here in our own backyard, and the firefighters in Jamestown are able to utilize those facilities and resources quite readily. I'm going to go into our responses. Our medical responses changed in March. We as a county, as fire service and medical response overall, adjusted how we responded on incidents. And so the big thing that we tried to adjust for was to decrease our exposure to potential COVID exposure. And so everything was new back in March, but over time we learned a little bit more about COVID itself, but was also able to adjust our response accordingly. So what we did, you see our numbers are down, 2891 total responses as a fire district. That was up above around 3,400 last year. And so the medical responses played a big role in that decrease. One thing that we did was we didn't respond on as many calls. We weren't dispatched on calls that normally we would be dispatched on. So some of the low priority calls that EMS handled alone, there was still a response given from emergency service, but EMS may have responded alone without fire, just so that we as emergency service could decrease that potential exposure overall. So that's one reason our numbers are down. Jamestown had 536 calls for response in 2020. Just like to, you'll see a couple of these are put in a pie chart just so we can kind of see the spread, how it relates, Station 46 amongst the other 5 stations. And Station 46 is always second or third within the majority of calls and call response for our district. A breakdown of those calls, the majority is medical incidents, and then it breaks down as follows under fire incidents, fire alarms, motor vehicle accidents, and then the service good intent false alarm calls. So primarily 65% roughly is medical calls, and that's pretty much how it trends between 50 to 60% throughout the last few years. In the town of Jamestown, 348 medical incidents, 26 fire incidents, 81 fire alarms, 22 vehicle accidents, and 59 good intent calls or other type of service calls throughout the district. I have a slide in here that'll kind of break down here in a little bit. We often talk about Shannon Gray and how that influences quite a bit of calls in our district, and those calls were down significantly as well. In the town of Jamestown, 65% of the calls that we responded on last year were medical incidents of some sort, with the fire alarms and service calls being the other primary calls in the district. One thing that Jamestown is fortunate to have as well is EMS is housed in the fire station next door. So a lot of times if the EMS unit is in-house with us, so they're responding with us alongside. So that's really key for the residents of Jamestown to have that unit readily available in the town limits of Jamestown. Our 6-year call trend in Jamestown, you can see the difference from last year. We were trending up, and then we were on the mark to double the calls overall in the district within a 10-year time frame. And then obviously COVID played a role in the decrease in 2020 with that. With Shannon Gray, you can see for 2020 we wrote 32 calls compared to over 100 calls last year. The big reason for that is all nursing facilities and that fire and EMS were only riding certain incidents in those locations, again, because that was a high-risk location for COVID. And so unless there was a CPR or some type of rescue breathing call at Shannon Gray, the nurses on hand would handle that stuff or EMS would respond. So that's why the call volume for fire is down such a large number.
So often EMS would go, but y'all would not go.
Correct, yeah. The fire incidents within the town of Jamestown, or as Pinecroft Sedgefield overall, was a little over 2 million exposed to fire property value. That includes residential as commercial and vehicles. Property value lost to fire, $423,000, with 1.9 saved. I show you that to show you within the town of Jamestown, right at 1 million, the value was exposed to fire with only a loss of around 43,000. So we had a very good year in the town of Jamestown, fire related, and so we had a 95% save on the values of anything that was exposed to fire in the town of Jamestown in 2020. The last two slides are slides that I showed last year. They're updated for this year, but it's something that a priority for us as a department that we've really set some goals for and have seen some decrease in our reaction times, which is how quick we get out of the fire station, and then the response time on how long we're on the road from the time that the call comes in for help until we can arrive on scene. And so you can see here from the last 4 years that we've had a significant decrease on our 90th percentile, which is 90% of the time how often this is occurring, and our decrease in our response or reaction time out of the fire station was significant on the decrease there of close to 30 seconds. And then our travel time. So our travel time, as you can see as well, is averaging in the town of Jamestown 5 minutes, and that encompasses the whole everything. And some of that is outside of the town limits of Jamestown. That is area that is protected on the far limits of Jamestown, but that has played into that. But 90% of the time, we're on scene in less than 5 minutes. And again, that's a decrease from where we were 4 years ago. So when people call 911, seconds feel like minutes, and minutes feel like hours. And so we're proud of the fact that we can decrease what we can do to decrease this time, as a direct impact on the citizens of Jamestown. And so that means a lot for us, and it continues to be a priority for us to get there in the safest manner in the quickest time as we can. So that's our presentation for the 2020 annual report. We're, just want to reiterate that how glad we are to serve the citizens of the town of Jamestown and work for you and the partnership that we've had over the years and continue to have. So any question that you have for us, we'll be glad to answer.
Well, I was just curious when you said people could contact you if they were in need of a smoke alarm. Where did they call?
So they can call our headquarters station. That's 336-299-4421.
Okay.
Or they could go to our website, and all that information is on there, or our social media.
Okay. And then I just was curious, I remember when y'all decreased the fire insurance rating to 2, which is
Correct.
awesome. What would it take to get to a 1?
So it's funny you ask. So we're actually meeting with some of the ISO staff and OSFM staff in the next coming weeks, and that's some of the stuff we're going to look at.
Okay.
So there's some limitations based off staffing and water and everything.
Yes.
The good thing about the town of Jamestown is it's hydranted.
Yeah.
And that's part of the limitations on why we have a split rating as a fire district, because the 3, part of that plays into it on our rural areas. But that's some of the stuff that we would, we set goals for ourselves. That's one of our goals, that we'd always like to have continuous improvement. So
Okay.
that's something that we're going to sit down and look at, is how we can possibly achieve that stuff.
Okay, very good. Well, I thank you for your service.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate what you do.
Thank you
very
all.
much.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you all.
Captain Holder, would you give us our sheriff's report?
So I vowed to not follow that presentation again this year, and you got me again. You guys are unbelievable,
We'll
so
let you
I'll
do
do
the
my
rest of
best, I
the year.
promise.
Page down when you want to change.
All right, fantastic. So I'm Matt Holder. I'm the captain of the District 3 office with the Sheriff's Office that's housed here in Jamestown. And we basically service the southwest portion of the county, so from about 421 South going out of the county, back up to Market Street going into Kernersville. We do that with about 35 of us, plus or minus. We're a pretty new district. We've been employing a lot of new young officers. Full, we're about 35 people, and that's myself and my Lieutenant Zeb Wiseman. We have a sergeant over a criminal investigation unit, and she currently has 2 to 3 detectives at any given time. And then we have 4 patrol sergeants that provide that patrol service, 24 hours a day through Guilford County. Most of those squads are 5 to 7 officers. To give you an idea, that third of the county that we police, there's about 5 to 7 officers if we're fully staffed nighttime. And then obviously during the daytime, we can supplement them with other units in the department. We had a guy run from an officer today, and pretty much any available officer went over there and helped that officer, so we can pull from other places. And as I talk about this year, and kind of like our friends at the fire department, it's been a different year for us too. I'll show you how we use some of those different resources to help with problems, specifically in Jamestown this year, okay? And I heard you, and now I forgot. Boom. All right, so not to hide anything, in red, you're going to see your totals, and then any increases and stuff, you'll see it by percentage, and that'll be in red too, just so you can kind of see. I don't believe in excuses, but I do think there's a few things I'd like to give you an explanation on. And I think most of those were positives. They started out a little rough, though. And you'll see, and I want to draw your attention to the totals at the bottom. These are what we call Part 1 offenses. It's, lack of a better way of saying this, these are the things that seem to be important for people. We're seeing victims. People are a victim of a robbery or their car is stolen. Offenses like assaults and aggravated assaults, where it would be an assault of extreme nature, a weapon used, a strangulation, something like that. And then obviously thefts like burglaries to your home, larcenies of your vehicle, break into your motor vehicle, things like that. The total for the year is 62. I'll show you some totals of previous years. 2 big months for us this year were March. You'll see a total of 15 down there at the bottom, as opposed to some of those single-digit numbers. And then again in August. And again, I'm going to give you some kind of like case studies just to show you how we worked through those months. Your total for the year, again, is 62. Do it? All right, here we go. Okay, here's your percentage increase, and as you'll see, many categories we had an increase in this year. So 2019, for example, we had 0 homicides. This year we had 1. That was our officer-involved shooting on Penny Road this year, and that gets classified as a homicide. So there's your 100% increase in homicide. Rape is down, that's good. Obviously, we had 2, 2019, 0 in 2020. Robbery, we had 1 robbery this year that occurred in front of the Dollar General on Main Street in Jamestown. I'll talk briefly about that in a minute. Aggravated assaults, that's a pretty big increase. I will tell you that aggravated assaults, went back and looked at them specifically. So to give you an idea, one of those is actually the homicide because the officer was the victim of an aggravated assault, right? So you got 1 from the homicide. 3 of those were domestic related. So an assault that reached what we consider aggravated assault criteria in a domestic environment. And I think some of that we're seeing with other domestic numbers this year. People are home, they're out of work, kids are home, and I just quite frankly think there's more times where people are together in the home for those types of incidents to increase. The burglaries are up 17 over 10. Again, that 1 month I was telling you about was, I'm sorry, well, the 1 month was about 8 or 9, I think, up in 1 month, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Larcenies are down. Motor vehicle thefts are up. That's something we're seeing an extreme trend in here lately, not only for us, but we're seeing it in Greensboro, High Point, around the state, and I would assume even around the nation. I tend to kind of watch state and local numbers. And some of that, I think, is also due to this COVID stuff. People are home. It's harder to break into your home while you're home. Motor vehicle break-ins have been really high for us and all of our surrounding agencies over this past year, because that's something that typically occurs at night. So whether you leave your car running in front of the gas station, sometimes we'll see that. But usually late at night, they'll break into cars, mostly unlocked cars, and if they can, they'll steal the car too, and then they'll use the car to go commit robberies, other assaults, break-ins, whatever they need the car for until it runs out of gas. And we have definitely seen an increase in that in and around Guilford County, Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem. All of us are dealing with that a lot more regularly. That gives you a total of 62 for the year. You see that we're up 62 over 57 from the previous year. Okay, here's your call for service, and I want to show you, last year we went back to calls for service. When you see the 1,000 numbers the previous years, and I think one of you asked me for that, and I got it to you after the meeting. That's when you start adding things in like traffic stops and officer-initiated stops, things like that. But your general call volume tends to fluctuate around 800 to 900 calls per year. This year was pretty low in call volume. Again, people are home. You're less likely to break into somebody's house or steal their weed eater out back maybe while people are home. That could attribute to that. And then quite frankly, we're getting ready to get into some of these units that we created this year for very specific uses. I'll be honest with you, the units are under my command, and I use them all the time for stuff. I use them in Jamestown, I use them in Stokesdale, I use them I try to be as creative as I can to use these units to assist with specific crimes. I know I told you last year we used, Sheriff had started some saturation campaigns. He was interested in policing High Point and Greensboro as much as the county to help supplement some of their problems with crime. And in that, I was telling you guys, sometimes your Jamestown car could be up on the edge of High Point helping with the saturation patrol. Well, we have units now that specifically do those types of things, and I'll use those units now in Jamestown to help with problems. And again, I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Okay, so the two units that we started this year, one is the street crimes unit, and one is what we call the special enforcement team, and that's this Mustang team. Everybody seems to know it by the type of car they drive. The Sheriff's Department purchased 6 Mustangs. We use those guys. High visibility, and we typically use them for traffic-related stuff. And I kind of combined the two on the sheet, and I'll cover them. So the special enforcement team, they go out and they work radar, traffic enforcement. They're really trying to work high traffic volume areas where we have complaints and or we know to have problems. And they're going to do a lot of things. They're going to keep the traffic fatalities down or help with that. They're going to work some of these initiatives with Greensboro and High Point where they've noted speeding issues, traffic accident issues, fatality issues. But in that, when you're stopping cars, you'll run across other stuff too. And it's real common for them in a week to stop, 300-400 cars. And in those 300-400 cars, we'll run across felony violations, narcotics, firearms, stolen equipment, things like that. I specifically have used, now this unit's been in place for about 2 months. We started at the end of 2020. And specifically, I've used them on Guilford College Road. Guilford and Guilford College to work that. We've had speeding complaints in that area. I've had them work Forestdale because we have some cut-through traffic creating issues occasionally on Forestdale. And I've used them several times. Gate City, Mackey, kind of leaning towards this side of town. And then heavily, we've been using them on 2970, 85 southbound to help with this construction area out here. So if you've seen the Mustangs, that's what that's all about. Again, we run across all kinds of crime in the enforcement of traffic violations. The second unit is the street crimes unit. They've been in place, we started them kind of just after COVID, so the timing was terrible. However, they've been really productive and it's been really helpful, I think, with some specific crimes to Jamestown, but just to give you an idea. So both of these teams are new. We use them to supplement, right? So when Jamestown's having crime, I can use street crimes as 6 officers. That's a lot of people when I run 5 people for this whole third of the county. I'll take 6 officers, put them in Jamestown and say, hey, we're looking for a gray car, it's been breaking into houses, this is what we have, go out there and find it. Or we're having problems with speeding and there's a drug house on Main Street, let's go work that problem. They work directly with CID, which is important, so if CID has tips or complaints or things they need follow-up, I have a 6-man unit that can go out and do that for them. I give them very specific investigations, focus areas, persons of interest, anything that's creating a specific problem for us. So often we'll have a drug house, and that drug house, with it comes larcenies. And, that car that did the larceny at the Dollar General was at the drug house yesterday, and this and that. So I'll give them those specific problems and work on it, okay? And I'm going to show you how we do that here in a minute. And hopefully the goal of that will be that'll decrease the crime that could be coming from the problem that we don't have crimes associated with, okay? To give you an idea, that one unit, for example, just to show you kind of how busy we keep these units, the bottom line there is my division. And we're a very proactive division. 10 search warrants, 75 firearms seized this year, $115,000 seized by either the Department of Justice or the North Carolina Department of Revenue, so drug money. 25 vehicles seized or recovered, 400 warrants served, 2,200 citations, 36 DWIs. That's 35 people working around the clock, 24 hours a day. 40 to 50 hours a week in 7 months is the bullet above that from the street crimes unit. You see they're pretty productive. 20 search warrants served, 79 firearms, $120,000, 400 criminal charges, and they specifically are working with a focus on that kind of stuff, right? So they're productive, they're proactive, and I think they're going to help. They've been helping this year, which is what I'm getting to, and I know they're going to be helpful to us this year in the future. All right, so I give you 2 cases of interest. The reason I do this is because these are those 2 months I told you. You see, when you have 3 burglaries in a month, when you have 9 burglaries in a month, that's a big deal to Jamestown. We understand that. The March date of last year is when we were having the break-ins to the townhomes under construction in Crepe Myrtle neighborhood down here.
Where is Crepe Myrtle Townhome?
It's down here off, it kind of runs in behind the post office back in there. Am I getting that right?
Is that called Crepe Myrtle on Ganaway?
I thought it was
The townhomes that
across,
were under construction last year, it's Crepe Myrtle Drive, I think is the,
yeah.
Near Mrs. Winters?
I didn't know
Yeah, a
they
little
were
farther
called-
down the road.
I didn't know they were called Crepe Myrtle. Okay,
Yeah.
I got you. On down West Main.
Crepe Myrtle Drive is the name of the street. I don't know the development, I'm sorry, I don't know the
No,
development.
I'm glad you told me
So-
the name of them.
Yeah, so we had, those were regularly getting broken into, under construction. Somebody would break into them at nighttime, steal the dishwashers. It was often, if 2 dishwashers and 2 stoves got delivered, they would break in late at night and steal those appliances. So we took criminal investigations, started to work on developing a suspect. We were able to develop a suspect through the use of some cameras. Now, I use my Special Operations Division to come out and install cameras and help us keep an eye on these places. Then I have one of those officers down there kind of monitor the camera. We develop a suspect, and we find that this suspect is posting things. It wasn't Craigslist, but it's an online. Not of our property, but oddly enough, he's posting appliances. So we use an undercover narcotics detective to contact him, buy an appliance. It ends up being one of your appliances. And we solved 9 cases specific to Jamestown by doing that, and 15 cases from 2019 doing the same thing in High Point. So you can see how we try to use other resources to help. And then if you look at the months past that, we're back down to single-digit numbers. If we did not solve that, I think we'd have seen a pretty significant increase on top of that increase, because this guy was just a regular offender that would do that all over, the Jamestown area.
Was that bad guy one of our usuals?
He was well, he wasn't one of our usuals. He has a history, and he was specific to High Point. He was doing a lot of this in High Point over the last 2 years. So again, working with High Point, sharing information, using our resources as best we can. I mean, it's a break into townhomes, stealing appliances, and I'm using narcotics officers to help us. I mean, I'm no shame in my game kind of thing. I'll use whatever resource I can. The second one is a little bit more specific. This is motor vehicle larcenies, burglaries in Jamestown, Greensboro, High Point, surrounding counties. Specifically, they were in Whittington Hall. And breaking into some cars, some not reported, and stole at least 1 car at Whittington Hall. We ended up catching these guys and basically figured out who they were. They were juvenile offenders, and that adds a whole nother level of complication. But we went out and started really aggressively trying to catch them and work them with that street crimes unit. And we were recovering a couple of cars a week. You know, they would ditch cars, and due to our chase policies and quite frankly, the fact that they're juvenile and we don't want them to get hurt, we wouldn't chase them a lot of times, but we would locate them and collect property. And in that stolen car would be property from break-ins, from other break-ins, right? With our criminal investigations, specifically ours in District 3, and the street crimes guys, we ended up serving 236 petitions. So that's like a warrant in the juvenile system on this group of individuals. And these guys were doing this that we know of 8 to 9 counties. Every night, all around the Piedmont. And they were living right here in High Point, coming just across the line into Jamestown and just, quite frankly, causing a lot of havoc for us in Jamestown. And that's the kind of stuff that we're using these special teams for. And I think it's proven already a couple of cases this year to be really useful to us. But I think the preventative maintenance and the measures we're getting from them are going to be really helpful to us in 2021. So I think that's my last slide. It's not letting me do it. Yeah, so I'm more than happy to answer questions. Specifically, I know you like response times.
Yeah.
I'm going to get them to
You
you.
read my mind.
Yeah, we run between 8.5 minutes to about 9:15 on our response times. We're well within that every year. I think we're going to be fine on that. They sent me a general response time this year. The district's response times always run between about 11:15 and 12:15, 12:30. We're right in line with our district. So as long as I can get them to pull out this, what we call zones, response times, I'll get them to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Have a great night.
Thank you, Captain.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you for your service and keeping us safe.
Yes, ma'am.
Y'all be safe too out there.
Okay, Judy, would you give us the presentation on the nonprofit grants?
So we've been talking about contracts for services for a while in conjunction with the nonprofits. And we did finally get, I guess in December, a request from the Y for some services that they would like to provide for Jamestown residents. So you have a list of those, and they did, as we requested, break these down into different sports. They broke down the youth recreation, the baseball, the volleyball, soccer, and flag football, and determined how much that those, sports would cost for Jamestown residents. As well, yoga in the park, they came up with an amount for that, and that's something they do in May and June. And then the youth swim lessons for Jamestown youth participants, they came up with an amount for that. Then in addition, they had kind of an adult wellness machine that they are interested in purchasing. So that was included in the request. So the total they actually requested was $27,750. Last year, we funded just slightly over $20,000 to the Y. And we also, I guess in January, we got a request from JYL, Jamestown Youth League, they just kind of did a sum of funding. $15,000 is what they've requested, but they didn't really break it down into Jamestown residents and different sports. So I did request that they give us more information, broken down in that manner.
And you haven't got anything back from them yet?
No, not yet. I have not.
Because that's been about 3 weeks ago.
Did they indicate they were going to try?
Yes, he did say he would get me some information, so. So at this point, and we actually have $25,250 in the recreation service budget, in the current budget that we have. So at this point, I wanted to see if you were interested in selecting some of these services for the Y, that we could go ahead and enter a contract with them to provide these. If you were interested in doing all of the services that they requested, but not the wellness, fitness machine type of thing, that total would come to $19,400. So, it's just up to you if you want to go ahead and, allow us to enter into a contract with the Y for these specific services. And then JYL, as soon as I get more information, I can pass that on to you.
Under the section of the youth recreation, did they give you any sort of numbers of kids? They say 50% or 50 to 60% participants will be from Jamestown, but there's no numbers there, like they did down at the youth swim lessons at 16 youth, which comes out to $250 apiece, but they at least gave you numbers there versus under the youth.
Right.
Did they indicate?
No,
any?
this was all the information I got.
Any additional questions?
Well, if you're through,
Yeah,
I'll be quiet if
I want to hear y'all's input.
Okay, well, of course, I thought the yoga in the park at Ren Miller was very well received, and I would think that $400 grant would be appropriate there. And I think the youth swim lessons is awesome. I think water safety for young people is very important. As far as I know, the Y would be the only facility that has a swimming pool that could, could do it. So I thought that $4,000 grant from them would be appropriate. The thing I wondered about was I'm trying to lick my finger. Would we want to fund two organizations, be it JYL and the YMCA, that are providing the same sport, the baseball and the soccer, because they're, both doing that, and we want to fund both organizations. But then I thought, the YMCA has gotten their information in and has done what they're supposed to do with the requirements of the grant. So instead of waiting for JYL, I think the Y's done what they're supposed to do, and I would see funding all of those requests. I wasn't real keen on the adult wellness machine. I would rather see some type of active older adult program. Of course, I know it's hard now to plan any kind of indoor activity for, especially for older folks, but we have a lot of older adults in Jamestown, and I would rather spend money towards that than this machine. Of course, that's my feelings on it.
I'm inclined to agree. I think that first off, I'd like to know what a Fit 3D Pro scanner actually does more than what's here, but I think everything else that was there, and I think you said it was what, 19,400? Barring that?
Yeah.
That feels like it would be more in line with what would be appropriate, but that's the only thought I've got at the moment.
And then I guess if JYL were to get their numbers together, we could look at that at a later time.
Yeah.
We could. The Y also, just on a note, they did seem very receptive to, if you had other ideas for, services, maybe like, older
Yeah.
adult services or something like that, that they would be very willing to look into doing those.
Sure.
That would be something I would think would be good for them to look at.
And that probably is going to end up being in the next fiscal year, not this fiscal year.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we're going to do this as a grant, aren't we going to have some numbers, though, for the youth recreation part of it?
Well, it technically won't be a grant. It's like they're providing services that the town itself could provide, but we don't have, the staff or the time to do that. So we are actually just contracting with the Y to provide those services.
Okay.
Right, no, I understand that. Originally, when we started, or when everything changed up, when we started this whole thing, we talked about having to put numbers on it, participation, not just 50% or 60% or which is what they've given us, is just a percentage. We talked about having to have some idea, and they have records of the numbers of students that would be involved or kids.
Well, they will need to provide a report, at the end of the fiscal year.
That's on the end of it. I'm talking about for us to approve this $15,000 for where we haven't been, I don't see where we've been supplied any numbers of kids that they have.
Well, are you talking about JYL?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
No, I'm
Talking
still
about
with the
youth
Y.
Oh, okay, when you said 15,000, I saw JYL
Yeah,
there. Okay.
that's page 54 on our,
It's the youth recreation paragraph, Martha.
Yeah,
would we be in any violation in granting the grant without having those numbers up front? My understanding was, to begin with, we had to have some physical number, which was the whole thing up front, which is the same thing about with, we're going to hold back for, I guess, well, they're talking about 1,500 kids, but they don't say specifically out of Jamestown. So this is the same issue. They're not saying how many kids out of Jamestown that we're paying for.
I mean, they did calculate the cost per providing that, but yeah, they did not provide the number of participants.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So if with the Y, we hypothetically went with the 19.4 number for them, and there was a remainder left over from what we still have on hand, assuming JYL came back around with any more detail, would that still be applicable at that point?
Yes, I mean, we could look
We
at
would
that
still have funds available for them.
at another meeting.
I'm just, again,
But basically, for the time period between when you approved it and then June 30th.
right.
So,
so Lawrence, you're asking, like, instead of the baseball, where they've got $9,346, 50% Jamestown residents, you're saying it needs to say there's 55 kids.
Yeah, it's the same
Equal.
thing we're asking JYL to break down for us, even though they, Y has done it for some of the others, or all the others, they just didn't for the youth, they just said 50%, 50 to 60%. So are we paying $4,600 for 5 kids or 100 kids?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Or are we granting the 4,600 and then the 3,200? And, to your question of the soccer and the baseball, are we going to pay twice? We're going to grant twice?
Well, my point with that is that the Y had their information in where JYL didn't. I don't think you should have to hold up the Y if they got their information in on time, whereas JYL didn't. But as far as the contract, which we would have to approve for you to go into a contract to do these services, could we ask to have that broken down at that time?
we could.
The actual number of kids?
And is this also based on just a Jamestown mailing address or within the limits of Jamestown? Because since we've switched from a grant process to a contract for
Right.
service, I feel like that's more important now than maybe it has been in the past.
I think it is just the Jamestown mailing address.
Okay.
It would be hard for them to determine, I guess, if, try to figure out by addresses who's actually a resident.
Okay.
Once that may be information they could provide in the report, once somebody signs up, they could, ask them the information they gather, if they're a resident or not, something like that.
And do they have actual plans to run these programs? Do we know if this is going to happen?
When they submitted this, they were planning to. Now, I can't say it'll happen for sure. I mean, if it doesn't, then we wouldn't pay
Yeah, obviously,
anything.
yeah.
Or, perhaps prorate it based on some kind of time period if they had
Yeah,
some
if
of
we
it.
contract, we're just going to cut the check and send it to them though, right? So it's a done deal. If we decide tonight to contract, we're just cutting the check and sending it. Is that right?
But if they don't fulfill the contract by providing the service,
We get the money back.
I mean, there will have to be some kind of accountability to do that.
Well, that's my only holdback, is they didn't give us the numbers on that, and they're just, throwing out a 50% number of what would be a $30,000 total. So, and we did ask for those specifics, and I agree with Martha with the JYL, we asked, and we've had those meetings, we've had those
Right,
meetings.
yes.
And we've yet to receive the specifics. Now, if you talk with them, they say they have really trouble in getting those numbers because of the accounting in the past, so I can understand that. The Y's got everything on computer. It should be pretty easy for them to give us that number. But I'll go with where the board wants to go with it, but I've said my piece.
Well, of course, I think we could go ahead and approve for Judy to enter a contract on the yoga in the park, $400 service, and the youth swim lesson, $4,000 service. And it's just if there's a way for them to give us a number of students on the different sports, that we would be open to doing that, but we need more than just 50%. That'd be 50% of what, even,
And the money would still be in the budget.
Correct,
To be
yeah.
distributed, so that
Yeah.
it's not like they're going to be losing anything until they give us the information we need.
Does that make sense to you, Judy? What we're saying?
So would you want us to come back next month with the number of participants before we entered into a contract? Is that what
I
you mean?
guess we would have to.
Is it all one contract, or are these separate issues? Are these separate services?
It would be
that they
one
would be
contract.
contracted?
So, okay. Well, yeah, I think, and that's not going to happen until May. It doesn't say when they would start the swim program. But I think to ease everyone's mind, I think it would be good to tell them that, yes, we're acceptable to the yoga and to the swim for the youth, but if they could give us actual numbers of kids within those 4 sports, that we would be acceptable.
Agreed.
That makes sense to everybody?
I agree with that, and I also, I know that we've been clear with everyone about this, like Lawrence said, we've all had the meetings, but, they're still using the grant language in their proposal, so just to be very clear, this is a contract service. This is not grant money that we're just giving you in case it is a situation where
Right.
they're not able to provide those services. It's not, this wasn't just a grant that
No,
they don't, have to pay back or something like that.
Right,
This is
correct.
we
Right.
can't do it on our own, so.
Yeah.
Which is why I want those numbers. That's what we said up front.
Do you want to approve the 4,400 tonight, Judy, or do you want to wait until we have all of it and do one motion to allocate?
It might be good if we met with them and tried to come up with a formula that we would use for this year, which may be a little less specific than in future years since we have the transition in information. But, rather than have one thing reported this way and then something else the other way, it might be good to wait and let us see if we can come up with something that would be more specific and let us know the cost utilization, direct cost, indirect cost, and come up with a formula for reporting so that we don't face this again next year. And now this year could be a little bit less specific than we want, but next year we can start collecting information in a way that would yield a better cost number. Because this is just very general, and it might be good to do it all together. That would be my suggestion.
Well, so we would
Sounds good.
make a motion to table this until the February, what is that? What's the-
16th,
What,
February
16th.
16th.
16th meeting?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Is that all you need, Judy, to?
You can just get that information
Yes.
for us.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Beth, what's going to discuss the unsealing of the minutes?
Beth is going to do the unsealing of the minutes? It's hard to hear with these masks. I feel like I scream if I try to speak up.
And I'm talking as loud as I can.
I know.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. As we do every year, I reviewed our closed session minutes from the previous year, and because all of them involved either personnel matters or ongoing litigation, it would be my recommendation to you not to unseal anything this year.
Okay,
Agreed.
Thank you.
thank you, ma'am. Okay.
You need a motion on that?
She just did recommendation. Okay, Matthew, our public hearings, please.
My apologies. Sorry to jump the gun.
That's all right.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Got a couple little slides here for you. Let's see if this works. So we're going to have the first public hearing is a consideration of an annexation request for 2221 Guilford College Road, 5300 Mackey Road, 2207 Guilford College Road, 5230 Mackey Road with an asterisk, and then 5303 Mackey Road, which I will just refer to as the Johnson Farm. During the annexation certification of sufficiency by the town clerk, 5203 Mackey Road was determined to have already been annexed into the city of Greensboro. It's about 6/10 of an acre. It's just a sliver. So it's not going to be considered for rezoning or for annexation at this time. It represents approximately 443 plus or minus acres, according to the petition. Taking a look at the procedure, General Statute 168-31 does govern our annexation procedures for voluntary contiguous parcels. One of the requirements is that a petition be received and signed by the owners of the property located in the area being requested. The town did receive a petition for annexation from the Johnson family. We have followed the statutory procedures for annexation leading up to tonight's public hearing. The clerk has presented a certificate of sufficiency at a previous council meeting. The council did adopt that. The town posted the property and did advertise the public hearing. It took an entire newspaper page, full page. Having a general circulation in the municipality at least 10 days prior to this evening's hearing. And in addition, I will say the town did mail all the property owners within 500 feet of the subject property a notice, which is above and beyond those requirements by statute. Following the hearing, the council will need to decide if the petition meets the requirements of the law, and then they may decide to annex the property. See if I can get it to change there. The request to annex is a companion request to the rezoning, which will be heard in the next public hearing. Therefore, the staff do recommend that the council continue this public hearing without further advertisement until the February 16th, 2021 regular meeting, which will be at 6 p.m. in this room. Are there any questions? And I know that this is a public hearing. The board did decide that they would like to entertain public comment, and I know the applicant is here as well. If they wanted to address their requests, we have those items as well.
Madam Mayor, may I just, something I just wanted to say. I think I read in the Jamestown News, it stated that the planning board had turned down the annexation request, which of course by general statutes, an annexation goes straight to the governing board. It doesn't go to the planning board. So I just felt that ought to be cleared up. Of course, the planning board did hear the rezoning request, but obviously this is the first time the annexation has come, and it would just come before the council.
That is correct. Any other questions or comments? We can do that if you decide that you'd like to hear from the applicant first. I know the applicant is here, so I don't know if they have any comments at this time either.
Let's listen. Let's hear what
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll listen to the applicant if they'd like to speak at this time.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Amanda Hodiern. I'm the attorney on behalf of the applicant. My client has the property that Mr. Johnson described under contract for purchase, and that's where we come in pursuant to that sale contract. And at this time, I think I'll reserve my comments about the larger project until we get to the rezoning item. But I did just want to let you know I'm here. If there is anything specific to the annexation we need to discuss, we can do that. But the main thing I wanted to emphasize and reiterate is that this, of course, is the companion annexation to the rezoning, and we would want to just keep them on a parallel track. Thank you.
Thank you.
We want to have, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this annexation issue at this time?
I think the next one.
Were there any mail-ins or any emails?
Do I need a motion to continue this until the February 16th meeting then?
February 16th.
Yeah, well, I would make a motion to continue this public hearing on the annexation to the February 16th meeting at 6 PM here in the Civic Center without further advertisement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Now, we'll do the other part of this annexation.
Sure. Again, same parcels of property, 2221 Guilford College Road, 5300 Mackey, 2207 Guilford College Road, 5230 Mackey Road with the asterisks, and 5303, again, the Johnson Farm. Proposed rezoning from agricultural, to planned unit development, or PUD. Again, approximately 443 acres total, and again, the 5230 Mackey Road sliver was removed from the request because it is currently in Greensboro. It's probably a little bit difficult for you to see that, but I'm hoping that it does come through for the folks at home. This is some aerial shots of the subject property, which takes up most of the foreground. I did label some of the subdivisions that are nearby. Cedarwood, which would be to the, this is looking north, so the Cedarwood would be to the west. Jordan Creek to the north, Bordeaux and Brook Run, which are in the city of Greensboro, and then Fox Hollow, which is in our ETJ, over to the east. And I know you're having a tough time reading that. Again, this is looking south. So in this particular photograph, the foreground is Brook Run and Bordeaux and Jordan Creek. Again, Brook Run and Bordeaux in the city of Greensboro. Then the things that are, to the left side of that photograph are in the city of Greensboro. That's part of Adams Farm. Fox Hollow is again up in the top left-hand corner. And the Johnson Farm fills the top portion of that page, north of the road, which is Mackey Road. Looking east, you can see that Guilford College Road is the road that makes sort of the L shape in that photograph. Johnson Farm fills the top part of the photograph. Again, Bordeaux and Jordan Creek on the top left of the page. Cedarwood to the bottom left. And in this one, you can also see in town Woodbine and Whittington Hall. So you can just get an idea of what those subdivisions look like in relation to the farm. Again, the larger vacant parcel in this one looking to the west is Johnson Farm. On the right, you'll see Jordan Creek, Bordeaux, Brook Run, and then Fox Hollow is towards the bottom of the photograph. Currently, it's mostly vacant. There's a lot of woods, some pasture land. There are 2 single-family homes that are occupied, and 1 single-family home that is vacant that are on the property. It's bordered to the north by properties that are zoned multifamily residential and single-family residential, as well as a tremendous amount of property that's within the city of Greensboro's jurisdiction. To the east by single-family residential zone property, and again, the city of Greensboro. To the west by mostly single-family residential, which is mostly Cedarwood. To the south by properties that are zoned civic, agriculture, and single-family residential. The property is in our secondary growth area per the 2020 Land Development Plan Growth Strategy Map. This property is located in what we call the suburban residential traditional neighborhood development. There's an overlay on that in our future land use map. The property is adjacent to Town of Jamestown's water and sewer utilities. And the applicant is requesting the rezoning from ag to PUD, and the reasons that they stated were that they would like to request the rezoning in order to be able to develop a high-quality, comprehensive master plan community. The proposed plan includes various uses and site features which are not permitted currently in the agricultural district. See if I can get that to change for you. The planning board met between August the 10th of 2020 and November the 23rd of 2020 to discuss the request. They met very frequently, generally every 2 weeks during that time. They did culminate with a vote on the 23rd of November. And in that particular vote, they requested that the rezoning be recommended for denial to the town council in a 6-to-1 vote. There is a lot of information in your packet. I'll be happy to answer questions if I can. I know the applicant is here as well, and then we have the public hearing. Any questions for staff?
So the planning board chair will not be here to give the recommendation?
She was not able to be here this
You're just
evening.
giving it on her behalf?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Not at this point, no.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matthew.
Good evening. Again, for the record, Amanda Hodiern. My offices are at 804 Green Valley Road in Greensboro, and I'm the attorney on behalf of the proposed developer, Diamondback Investment Group. I have with me tonight the principal of that entity, Zach Tran. And just to tell you a little bit about Diamondback, they are a triad-based developer. Their offices are in Greensboro. They do projects all over North Carolina, and their sweet spot is residential development, primarily single-family and townhome. They do have some multifamily projects in their portfolio, but frankly, those are kind of an earlier facet of their company, and they've been transitioning away from that and primarily do the single-family in towns now and tend to find partners to take on those multifamily projects in the places where they still do that component. Similarly, when there's a commercial aspect to any of their projects, they also find a partner for that as well. So the distinction being that they don't actually develop their own commercial. They do this part of it where they get it entitled, have it pad ready, set the parameters so that then an end user can come in and take it vertical. So that's a little bit about Diamondback by way of going into the segue where I want to go first. If I may, I'd like to cover two things tonight. I want to start with where we've been and how we got here, because it's been a long journey. I know you all have been involved, and Matt mentioned part of it. And reason being, I think it's important so that we can chart a path on how to go forward from here and what our next steps might be that are efficient and collaborative and get us to an outcome that we all are happy with and proud of. So Diamondback was attracted to this property as a residential type of property. It's a big piece of property, as you've heard, almost 450 acres. You know where it sits in your jurisdiction on a major roadway facility of Guilford College Road. It's very conveniently situated on the interstate and bypass so that you can get to all points, Triad or further beyond east or west from this location. And those are the hallmarks of a good piece of dirt for residential use, because that means a lot of people can live there. It can work for people with all kinds of needs and necessities that dictate where they need to live. It's also big enough and situated in the county on these major roadways in proximity to the facilities and the travel corridors that I've named, that it can support some non-residential uses, perhaps some neighborhood serving uses, perhaps some civic and institutional uses. I think that's one of the to-be-determined factors of this site. What is the best mix of that? So that's primarily what caught my client's eye when they put this property under contract in July of 2019 with the intent to develop it. From there, they entered into their feasibility study period, which of course is gathering all the data and the existing information about this property that's available to see, to try and shrink that universe of possibilities to what really is appropriate, what has already been determined to be a good fit and to be the regulatory requirements for this property, and what are the natural and physical features that would need to be navigated. So during that time, of course, surveyors are doing what they do, wetland delineations, but those type of physical studies. But also, we're doing a document review where we take a deep dive and we say, okay, what jurisdiction governs this property? Obviously, we quickly confirmed that it was within the town's ETJ, extraterritorial jurisdiction, which means, of course, that you have planning authority over it for zoning matters. So we looked at your guiding documents. We looked at your land use, your adopted land development plan from 2007. We looked at your adopted land development ordinance from 2009. And we saw a lot of great information there that really backed up and supported the potential that we saw for this property. In your land use plan, your adopted land use plan, we saw that it was currently served by water and sewer. We saw that it set with frontage on 2 designated major thoroughfares. We saw, of course, that it had significant environmental features that traversed the whole property in nice big green bands. We saw that there was a locally classified but non-designated historic and cultural resource on the property that had some significance to Jamestown and to the community. And perhaps most importantly, we saw the designations that Mr. Johnson talked about. We saw it was in the secondary growth area, which we read on means and tells us that these are areas immediately adjacent to your existing town limits that are currently served by water and sewer, and therefore have a high encouragement for short to midterm development, meaning 5 to 10 years. We talked about the designation for suburban residential. This is a future land use plan designation, and it's probably your predominant land use category here in Jamestown. This is your suburban residential neighborhoods, your lots that are platted with perhaps an amenity center, cul-de-sacs, roadways off a major thoroughfare, and a very traditional, conventional style of development that you have a lot of here in Jamestown and works well. But then we saw that this property also had the traditional neighborhood development, or T&D, overlay district on it. And interestingly, and very notably to us, it was the only property in all of Jamestown's planning jurisdiction that had that extra designation on it. And the way an overlay works, of course, is that it is an additional layer of guidance and direction that speaks to that property that it touches. It sits on top of the other metrics that are required to be applicable. So not only is it suburban residential, but it's also held to this higher standard, this more specific guidance of a T&D. And that more specific guidance told us from your language that the hallmarks of the T&D should be a mid to higher density, smaller lots, building placement close to the street, narrower streets, alleys, interconnectivity among neighborhoods with abundant sidewalks and street trees, and a variety of uses and housing types. It also calls for multifamily residential and perhaps a mix of commercial, office, and institutional uses that provide services to the surrounding neighborhood. So again, these guiding documents that have already been determined, have already been adopted, have already evaluated this property for its potential and its highest and best use, gave us this direction and set the path for us to not have to guess at what the town thinks or what the town thought would be appropriate for this. So we took that to be our guiding light on this, and to tell us that this is the type of proposal we would need to bring forward in order to have success with this project in Jamestown. It's also important to mention that the adopted land use plan doesn't just prescribe regulations or rather the framework of future regulations for property. It also provides a lot of valuable insight about the values and the goals of a community. And of course, Jamestown is no different. We learn in this document that you pride yourself on being walkable, being friendly for an aging population. And the goals that are set out in this document are expanding that network of sidewalks, making it more connected, making it more walkable, providing more housing options for an aging population and for more diverse populations. And also to build upon and add to your usable and connected open space network to create some actual traversable greenway paths that might provide someone an opportunity to go on a long walk or run or hike from one side of town to the other, to connect to those ample sidewalks that are important to you and really have a multimodal way to get around town. All of which we were happy to see, because all of those things support and substantiate a good T&D development. And as we know, as we talked about, our survey and our wetlands delineation and your comp plan documents had already shown us that we had significant bands of green space on this property that we could use to facilitate the goals of not only your adopted land development plan as a whole, but also the prescriptions of the T&D district. So that's what we set about to do. We felt like we had clear marching orders for the type of development project that was determined to be appropriate here. We set about our designers and engineers to work and put forth a T&D style project that was focused on showcasing high walkability and a strong sense of placemaking. Many months later, through many iterations and various attempts, we felt like we had a draft that was ready to get some feedback. Your rezoning process does not require a neighborhood meeting before filing like a lot of jurisdictions do, but we felt like certainly a project of this size and scope obviously warranted and merited that. So we did have a neighborhood meeting prior to filing anything.
I don't think it's required, but it's highly recommended
Yes,
within the
ma'am.
land of ordinance.
Yes, ma'am, it is. And so we did do that. We had that meeting on February 13th. I think most, if not all of you, were in attendance. We held 2 identical back-to-back meetings at one of the auditoriums on the GTCC campus. And that meeting was done prior to filing anything for 2 reasons. One, to just give a heads up to everyone, all the stakeholders, that this property was under contract with a developer with intent to develop it, and here's what they're thinking. Here's what might be coming down the pipeline. And more importantly, to gather feedback. The feasibility studies are great. They're valuable. All the guiding documents provide a great foundation and a platform, but of course you don't really know where you stand until you actually hear from people in the community, the people who live there, the stakeholders, the people who govern here, and who really know the heart of the community and what resonates with the citizenry here. So we had that meeting, and we got lots of good, valuable feedback. We learned that, while yes, Guilford College Road is a big facility and there's a lot of rooftops around, no, we really don't need a grocery store and we don't want one. So that was good feedback. That was something we took to heart and revised. We learned that the mix of housing type was an important feature. We learned that it was more important than more commercial space. And we learned that the type of commercial space that was likely to be embraced by the Jamestown community was of a more small-scale, small-town variety than a power center or a regional center. So we learned a lot of good feedback there. We learned about why the Mackey property was so important to the community, what the history of it was, what various stories were that people remembered about it. So we were able to really mine a lot of good comments and a lot of good revisions that took place after that meeting. So we went back to the drawing board. We did all that, and over the next 4 months, we refined our plan to produce one that was different on several meaningful elements. It had over 100 fewer lots, fewer units. It completely eliminated the multifamily apartment component from the project. It completely eliminated the grocery store, large destination scale retail. In fact, we lost about 250,000 square feet of retail from the first draft to the draft that was actually submitted in July. And not only did we cut down on the square footage, but we also reimagined it so that it was no longer a, I guess, connected inline structure facing out on Guilford College Road across from the Cedarwood subdivision, but instead a much smaller scale town square oriented style of development where it focused inward on an internal road and a town square and was of a vertical component, smaller bays that would produce smaller tenants and smaller users to be more of a supporting neighborhood element instead of a destination type of center. We also, in that plan, we increased the size range of lots and increased the square foot, the setback range, so that we could try and get more of that variety and dimension that we learned was so important to the community. Also during this time, you may recall that this was when your town was deliberating and discussing the planned unit development ordinance. And we watched that process closely because it of course, was very determinative to us as to what type of proposal we could submit. Under your existing ordinance, as it existed in February, and when we first started looking at all this, there was not really a district that facilitated and allowed for a true TND development. We talked about the fact that it's an overlay, not an actual zoning district. And when we dug down into it and in talking with your staff, we all kind of realized that there was no base district for it to overlay to. And so it was going to be difficult to ever get to that TND level of mixing of uses and innovative design and things that weren't conventional in the types of subdivisions we used to build in the existing ordinance. So we did watch that PUD ordinance carefully, and when it was adopted, we chose to apply for the PUD zoning for that reason, because we felt like it would give us the latitude and the mechanics for all of us to work together, the town, the decision makers, the stakeholders, and us, to come up with a balanced approach of how to create that TND flexibility and range of uses and design elements, while also being held to a set of standards and commitments that made you guys feel comfortable enough allowing us to go do these different things that aren't currently on the ground in Jamestown. So that's why we chose to do the PUD request. And that's how we've moved forward, and that is the type of request before you today. As Mr. Johnson mentioned, we started with the planning board in July and finished up there in November, and that was 4.5 months and a lot of meetings of hard work. The planning board had a hard job to take this big project with so many thoughts and opinions and of a type and scale that had not been done before in Jamestown, and to try and funnel that all down into a document and a plan and put it on a platter that everyone would like. And I think that we accomplished a lot of good work there, and we got a lot of good feedback that I think helped us and did move the ball. But I also think that we didn't quite get where we needed to be. Not just because we came out with a recommendation for denial, but more so because I think that we lost sight of the bigger vision and the excitement and the momentum of a project like this, because I think in reflecting on this for the last couple of months, my submission would be that I think we let ourselves get ahead of the game and we focused on details first when we had failed to come to a common understanding about the framework and the skeleton of what this project would be. And I think we realized that at the end, And we realized that we had all these great details, or the idea of a lot of great details, but without the framework and the spine to ascribe those details to, it all fell a little bit flat. And all that to say that we submitted a plan in November of 2020 to the planning board that they ultimately voted on, that was a very, very sincere attempt to meet those 4.5 months of feedback, and to also try and stay true to the comprehensive plan. Because we felt like in a project of this size, with so much at stake, and so much importance to the community and the citizenry here, that we could not ignore what had been decided and prescribed in 2007, when people were asked about this property before a developer was even at the table. Because that's when you get real answers, when you're talking about things that aren't yet imminent, when something's not at your neck and needing a decision, and you can really allow yourself to dream and imagine and vision what would be cool, what would be neat, what would we want to see here. And that was produced. We have the luxury of that existing here for this property. So we always felt like it was incredibly important to stay compliant with that vision. And we didn't want to let the tail wag the dog, or get so bogged down in details of an admittedly difficult task that we lost sight of what originally were our marching orders. And I think that was not the best way to go about it. And so I say all that to get to the second point that I told you I wanted to cover, which is, how can we go forward now? We're excited to be here at the town council now. Obviously, you guys have the input and the final say in this matter. So we want to hear that. We're excited to get back to that vision and energy and excitement about this piece of property that seems to be present when I go back and I read the minute meetings of that comp plan back in 2007. And when people imagined what this could be and what got put down on paper, I think the town had a sense of this particular piece of property being a showcase for the town of Jamestown, and being a strong sense of place, and carrying on the small town character and the tradition and all the amenities and things that people love about Jamestown, while also looking to the future and embracing new planning and development techniques, embracing new ways that people like to live in a community, and embracing new values that folks bring when they go to look for a home these days. So I thought a lot about, from November to now, how do we do that? How do we get back to that and learn and get the benefit of all that good feedback we got at planning board, but also, march forward now with a common understanding of what it is that we're trying to get to. So what I would submit to you is that we do this in the 2 steps that it reasonably breaks down into. I'd like to have a discussion about what is that framework? What is the vision of this property? I've looked at the comp plan. I've told you how it was our guiding document and how we interpreted that to say, the things that were important, and how we also applied the fact that there was a new PUD ordinance that was adopted that seemed to indicate, okay, this is how these things go together. This provides a mechanical, technical framework of how we can actually get to that T&D. And I think that is, as we've always said it would be, a delicate balancing act. That's a negotiation where we remember those black and white directives in the PUD ordinance that say this allows a higher level of flexibility in design and innovation for a developer in exchange for a higher product and quality and standards and commitments from that developer. So it's a quid pro quo that we're aiming for here. And before we can establish all the details and nuances and bullet point Bible commitments that are going to commit to that higher quality that is required, I would like us to get on a common understanding of what it is that a T&D PUD looks like in Jamestown. And is that something that we can all be in agreement on before we go through the exercise of determining all the details. Because here's what I've learned. It's very difficult to talk about setbacks and the way a garage is going to relate to a streetscape when we don't even know yet what type of lot we're talking about. Are we talking about a 12,000 square foot lot on a traditionally wide street with curb and gutter and maybe a sidewalk on one side that's laid out in a more engineering-based fashion? Or are we talking about a community where we're trying to create little enclaves of community types, where we're trying to make sure that everybody can get to that greenway over here that connects down to the town center, where we're trying to make sure that each neighborhood has its own little personality or its own little wow factor, but also fits into the larger narrative of what this entire project could be. So, you know, that was a hard-learned lesson, I think, because we thought, hey, if we can all just get on board with what the commitments are, the rest will fall into place. And I think that we all trudged down that path with the best intentions, but it didn't quite get us there, because at the end of the day, I don't think we were on the same page as to what does this really look like? What does this T&D really need to be at base before we go and put all the detail into it? So I know that you've already slated this for continuance tonight. I know that there's a lot to coalesce and to think about, but I would ask that we have some homework and some action items to bring back to you on February 16th, so that these 30 days are well spent and add to the deliberation and the discussions, and add to your framework and decision-making as you go forward, so that we know we're moving forward and not standing still, all of us. I know that you guys have had this in front of you or looming over your head for a long time. I know that we've tried a lot of iterations on this. I know that the community has been dealing with this. It's been a source of uncertainty and anxiety for almost a year now. And I want to take that aspect out of it for everyone and try to get on a clear path that goes about this methodically and procedurally, so that we all know what it is that's needed and necessary. And I also want to convey to you that the November 6th, I think it's dated plan that's in front of you and that's officially on the table right now, is, you know, the product of a lot of work and a lot of revisions, but, and it's also, you know, I think what was left of a plan that started out one way and tried to move and change and still be a T&D at the end of the day, which I don't think is the best way to get to a finished product. So I want to convey to you and emphasize to you that everything else you've seen along the way, we're still open to. We still think maybe there's a different recipe to all these ingredients that might be better and might have more of the magic, might have more of that Jamestown community vibe that you all want to see. You know, I think that it's hard to give direction for an entire community through 9 people, and your planning board worked very hard to do that, but it didn't, you know, judging by their vote, it obviously didn't come out that way, and we want to get it right. We want to take that feedback and put it into the version and iteration of the plan that is what you like. You know, to give you an example, we heard a lot about the farmers market at the meetings in February. You know, that would be the type of non-residential community supporting use that would be cool here. So we put that in. We felt like we're being responsive to a really good piece of feedback. And then, you know, there was a lot of, well, quite frankly, questions that it raised. And should it be here versus there? And how's it going to function? And do we really need that? And, you know, I think what we heard from that was, well, we don't really need a farmer's market here. There's another one in town. It's going great. We don't want to mess that up. When really it was maybe that we just needed to get the framework right and then see how it fit in. So this is a roundabout way of saying and trying to convey and emphasize to you that there's been a lot of iterations and components of this plan that may not still be in the book that's before you, but they're not off the table to us. We still are excited about a lot of those things, and if they weren't right the way that they were before, maybe that doesn't mean that they were completely wrong. Maybe it just means we weren't there yet. And that if we all could get on the same page about, okay, yes, this is a TND, or no, this is a conventional suburban suburb like we have done well and done for a long time here in Jamestown, then that will allow us to flesh out the component pieces and put the right detail mix on it. Because, you know, the reality is that it is a sliding scale of what's possible from a development end, from a financial end, from a yield pro forma end. There are certain amenities and aspects and components of a community that frankly just can't be done in a lesser lot count, typical conventional subdivision. And that's okay. If that's what is better for the community, then that's what we need to explore. Versus, you know, okay, we can agree to have a smaller lot size than we have in Jamestown currently, because we know that that means we're getting X, Y, and Z in exchange. And that X, Y, and Z can be, you know, the more open space, the usable open space in terms of, is it a community garden? Is it a ballpark? Is it a public art garden? You know, that I think we can get to once we know what is this framework? What is it that we're trying to design? And I think that if we stay in that kind of two-phased approach this time, we might have better success applying the feedback and getting to that level of detail that's actually defining a common vision, as opposed to just trying to get enough of it in there that we've met the burden of comfort for something that none of us really know quite what it looks like yet. And I know that that's an important aspect of this for you all as decision makers. I know it's important for the stakeholders in the community, because this is where you live, this is your home, and this is a place where you want others to come, and you want this to be a successful community. You want it to be something that adds to what is already a great town and doesn't detract from it. So I want to be able to get to that hard work. I know the devil's in the details, but I think we can't do that until we are on the same page about what type of community this is. So that's where we are. That's what I hope we can get from this meeting tonight. I know we're going to continue it, but I would hope and urge that we can get some feedback and hear your thoughts on the TND style, on how a PUD would be facilitated here in Jamestown, or on the suburban conventional scheme, and so that we can know and bring back to you something in that vein, as opposed to trying to just take another shot at something based on snippets of what we think, or what we thought we heard, or what we thought we understood, and that way you all in the community has a better starting point to go forward. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to speak again in
You got
rebuttal.
a lot to say.
Well, we've been at this a long time. I know it's important, and there's a lot that's transpired, so.
Oh, yes. Well, I do want to thank the planning board and the chair for their hard work, and you guys too for hanging in there. You put in a lot of hours, and like you said, they tried to dissect and deliberate on the plan, and it was a huge plan, and it is something new, as you said, for Jamestown. But I thought they did an excellent job of trying to break all of that down to get the best development for Jamestown. And of course, like I said, ultimately, the planning board voted by majority vote to reject the PUD rezone application. But now this PUD application that's been submitted to the council for consideration, while I watched all the planning board meetings virtually, This is the first time this PUD rezoning application has been submitted to the council for our approval or denial. I think there's been some confusion about that as well.
There is.
But this is the first time we've actually looked at it to get to work on it. And it's large and complex and pretty detailed. And I think this is probably the biggest decision that will affect the whole of Jamestown community since the town council approved the selling of alcohol at the ABC store back in 1961. So this is a huge thing. And while there are a lot of details to work out, which you kept talking about, I'm with you on the point that I think we need to work on the major items to get those addressed before we spend time on the finer details of the plan. Because if we can't agree on the major items, then the finer details are of no consequence. So I would say from the onset of this proposed PUD back in February, when they had the community meeting, which you're right, is highly recommended, it's not required, but had at GTCC back, I think it was February. From the onset of that, there's been some reoccurring concerns that were voiced by the Jamestown citizens, ETJ residents, surrounding community residents, and the planning board. And I see the major one, of course, is density. And I still think the present plan has too many dwellings per acre, be it the single family or be it the townhomes. And of course, this is also represented in lot size and front, side, rear setbacks and the dwelling square footage. But that's the number one item to be flushed out,
Absolutely.
in my opinion.
I agree.
I agree.
I'll go on to number two, the overcrowding of schools. Now, I know the town does not have authority on Guilford County school systems, and I thought the planning board did a great job of having those staff come from the Guilford County school systems and give us their report on their plans for expansion or building of new schools in the future. But I think the socially responsible thing to do is to try to apply some alternative to alleviate the increase of the children that would be added if this development were built. And Ms. Hodier, I think you stated, I think it was the very last planning board meeting, if I'm not mistaken, that the developer might be open to a charter school with Jamestown citizens getting maybe a certain percentage or something of the lottery placement. And then I also wondered about a private school. I've heard that Wesleyan School in High Point always has a waiting list. So either of those options would provide some improvement to the overcrowding of the schools. And it's not perfect, but yeah, I think that would be an asset to the development and to the community. Now, the element of civic use, while I have no adversity to churches, I think a true civic use has to be a benefit to all of Jamestown. So the area where you had as for a church, that's where I wondered about a fire department being investigated. I've heard there's need for a new fire department. And I believe the planning board chair had requested for someone from the fire department to come speak at the planning board meeting, but that never happened that I'm aware of. So I would make that same request. I would like to have the fire department either speak to the council or speak to the developer directly about the possibility and if there is the need truly for that and to have that at the proposed development. I don't know that this was a major item, but there was a lot of confusion about the baseball field. And all I want to say about that is that in looking at a need for the town, if the land's to be donated by the developer, I felt it needed to be a use that would benefit all different folks in the community. And baseball is a single sport, which would only interest people that are interested in that one sport. So, and of course, in this newer plan, that was taken, the town recreation was taken out, and I think it's got single family in there now, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
But I would put that back in to give to the town, but I would, and it could be debated about what would be the best use, but I was thinking a rubberized walking track would benefit more of the community, and then we could use some of the outdoor elements that were proposed in our preliminary master park plan with you guys. And, you know, that would service your young, your old, single folks, families, special needs people, a greater variety than the single sport. Then just on the commercial use, I just feel the commercial use needs to be a small percentage of the development, but, and it's even stated in the PUD documents that that commercial is primarily to service the development. It's not like a destination, as you had said. So sure, anyone could come in there and shop or eat, but mainly to service the people. And I do think it needs to be on the interior of the development, which y'all made some of those changes. So, you know, if we can't agree on these major things, I don't think it's a good use of time, like you said, to go down to other little aspects. And for me, it's the density in the schools. But, and I'll be quiet real soon, I promise, but I would request that the town council have some expert assistance in reviewing these PUD plans. And I know Matt Johnson has asked Benchmark to come to the February council meeting to help facilitate that meeting, just like they did for the planning board, and I think Vaughn is actually here tonight. But I would ask the interim town manager and the planning director to contact maybe a land use attorney, an engineer, an architect, or any other professional necessary to assist the council in making an informed decision on this PUD plan to get the best development for Jamestown. And this will require some special meetings, some work sessions, and some expense, but I think the council needs this expert assistance and support to be sure, again, the best possible development for Jamestown is achieved. We need some support to help look out for Jamestown's interest. You know, you guys do this for a living, and I'm not faulting you. You know what you're doing, but I'm not an expert. I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. So I would like some support that I know they're looking out for Jamestown's interest when we get down to some of these items. So that's my first take on what's happening tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback, and I can see you thought a lot about it, and that's very useful. Should we engage one at a time like this, or do you all want to talk before? Yes, okay. Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. You know, the school thing is a big discussion. It's moving parts, and yeah, I did throw out ideas of creative ways to do that. And like I say, I think if we decide that this truly is a T&D, which embraces a mix of uses and trying to have as much support for the folks who live there, then I think that makes sense to explore that. And, you know, I do not claim to be an expert on charter school setup, so I'm not sure how they can differentiate between population of students, but to me, that's an idea worth exploring if that's something that, you know, would help that factor.
Have you ever had any dealings with trying to set up a charter school or a private school in a development?
No, I have not.
You haven't?
Mm-mm. But, you know, I think that's something that, again, once we figure out, is this that type of community where we're truly trying to create a little community within a community, then, you know, that starts to be a valid question and something that makes a lot of sense to look at. And like you say, those are just two ideas. I think there's a lot of ways to look at it. The civic use, yeah, we'd happy to hear. I think we'd be happy to hear from the fire department, or if that's correct. Or
They're still here.
I know, I made a note. Yeah.
Maybe you could exchange numbers with them.
And I don't know what that need is, or if this is the part of town. I know that type of thing is often driven by geography, but yeah, happy to discuss. The ball field, I think that is a classic case of a snowball idea that got said and uttered one day, and then all of a sudden it was a ball field. And I think our intent was always to say, you know, that this is a big development in a small town, and it should contribute to that, and it should provide some amenity. And so I think that we don't have any predetermining thought on how y'all should use that, if
Yeah,
that's.
so I'm just saying it'd be
Yeah.
good to have it put back in, because it
Yeah.
was taken out because there was that controversy over that.
Yeah.
But we could work out what the use would be.
Yeah,
if land
I
was
think
done
that's a
there.
great example of where we just got off course in a detail
Yeah.
that didn't need to be lost.
Right.
Now, what I will say is that takes us back to your first point, which I think is one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest, is that is all, this is all, you know, a balance of how we do that density and lot yield, because there is still a financial component to this that is the reality at the end of the day. It has to get paid for. And so I think, you know, I think we need to think carefully about all these other things that can go in a community if we can, if we can stomach and get used to the idea that it's going to be smaller lots and the density might be more than what you're used to seeing. And that doesn't mean that it has to be that way. You know, if you gridded this thing out and made it grids 1 through 10, you know, I don't think it has to be the same in every grid. I think we could look at a lot of interesting ways to do that. I saw an email come through this week that cited Weldon Village in Kernersville as a template of a community like this that's the right way of how to do something like this. And I'm very familiar with Weldon Village, and I think that's a great idea. I think they do a very good job at it. They have a lot of different lot types and home types in there. They go all the way down to 2,700 square foot lots. So they are definitely doing the T&D at its full range, and I think that it makes all the sense in the world to use those case studies that already exist in our community, where we can talk to the planning director there. We can go see it on the ground. You can ask your questions about it, and we can learn from that and invoke the parts of it that you like, change the parts you don't, and really have a good go-by in a place like that is literally right in your backyard.
Well, and as you say, there's many different ways to develop something. That there again is where I go back saying I, as a board member, would want some expert assistance to support the board, be it engineer, be it architect, be it attorney, to help us, because there's more than one way to do it. And so I would have a hard time, well, I could not right now sit tonight and tell you, well, it needs to be this many units. I don't have a magic number right now. And the lots have to be this size. My impression it is too many right now, and the lot sizes are too small. But that's where I would like to have someone that's supporting Jamestown, looking out for our interests, to help us get what that magic number might be. I think a planned unit development, the idea, I'm not opposed to the idea. Obviously, I wouldn't have voted for an amendment. I think that it has some charm. But to me, this isn't it yet. I want to be honest.
Fair enough, yeah. I mean, I think I've been transparent, and I'll say it again, that this is not our favorite version of the plan that's come forward. So I think it could be a lot better.
Yeah.
I think it could be a lot more exciting and have a lot more magic to it. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to get there if we can all agree that that's where we're going.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up the experts again, because I forgot to address that, and I want to certainly understand what you're saying, and I get that. And my only concern would be, one, that we fold that in via some special meetings
Oh, I see.
or something
We'll have
that keeps us moving.
Yeah.
And two, that we do it in those special meetings so that, it continues to be a public process.
Oh, yeah.
A public legislative.
We have
So
to,
we can
yeah.
hear all that and respond to
I would
it.
want to.
Yeah,
Certainly would want
and that way we can respond to it, and you guys don't have to play telephone.
No, ma'am,
middle, yeah.
definitely, any special meeting, any work session is, of course, is open to the public. And
Right.
I don't know how we would set those up exactly now, and have to get with staff, especially with our COVID restrictions, but I'm certainly not comfortable without getting some support for the town.
And I know we haven't gotten the rest of the way down the table, but if that is something that we land on, I would just hope that we leave here tonight with a plan of action to put that in place, so that we don't go 30 days and come back on February
No,
16th and,
it needs to happen right away. Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to call for a 5-minute recess.
Through with all of us?
No, before we go through, we're having some technical issues,
Oh,
and I'd like to give us a break to get that done.
Okay,
Okay? And we'll be right back with you, Amanda, and continue with
Okay.
the rest of the board.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that small break. John, did you want to add anything to Martha's comments?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Martha pretty much hit on anything I would have thought of and had thought of, but I did want to reiterate 2 points that have been brought to me. One was, again, density, not a huge surprise there. Actually, 3 things. The second thing would be the municipality aspect of that piece of property that intersects at Guilford and Guilford College that had been talked about, I think that's where Martha was going with that. And then thirdly, as you're looking at the development proper, I'd had some people bring to my attention as far as the actual architecture of the houses, and had made a couple of different suggestions as far as, different things that would involve more Jamestown provincial type of architecture, shaker roofing, different things in terms of utilization of what the, like garage doors look like, what different aspects of the property itself, the structure would look like. So I'm not one to say, let's, throw out what's there. What's there is a good beginning, but maybe as you develop this into different arms of it, if you look at it as a hub and a spoke, different areas could have different representations perhaps, or something to that effect. That's been the feedback I've gotten. But other than that, like I said, Martha pretty much hit on it.
Okay, thank you.
Lawrence?
Ladies first.
I'll let you go.
Okay. Again, same thing with a lot of the suggestions that Martha had. She put it to words a lot better than I could have ever. But everybody that I've talked to about this development, every single one of my neighbors and people that come up to me and call me and talk are all concerned about the same things: density, setback, vinyl village, garages, parking, schools, all the things that go along with what the planning board and, all the different discussions that we've had, emails back and forth, all those things. So all that is still in everybody's mind, and it still seems like, again, those are the major things, like Martha said, that we've got to come together on before we can get down to the minutia and all the details, the things that go on. Not against the PUD, by no means, but I also want the best thing for Jamestown. I've been here since '01, been associated with the town much longer than that, and I don't plan on going anywhere. So I want to see something that comes together that is the best for everybody involved. Beyond that, people don't want a lot of commercial over there. So I'm just sharing what other folks have come up and said.
Okay, thank you.
And an excellent idea on us getting some lawyer assistance.
I would agree with the legal assistance, certainly for us, and to have some experts there who can, speak each other's language. And so it's not just us having to translate something or you doing the same. There would be no confusion about what actually comes out of it. Like everybody else, I will definitely echo Martha on the density issue. That's what I hear more than anything. Closely followed by overcrowding of schools situation. And so I think, big picture, and I'm liaison to the planning board, so I was in on all those very long, sometimes heated meetings. So I feel like I've been further into this than most of the folks on the board, but I really want to see the developer answering the questions that this community will bring up. And so, the stress on our infrastructure, I want you proactively to have an answer to that rather than us having to continually ask for, well, what about schools, or, what about a firehouse, or things like that. I think that these are things that you're going to know. If you add this many people, obviously we're going to need more staff, a larger building, things like that, more sanitation trucks perhaps, just anticipating those needs and coming to us and showing how you're going to, help with that. And, this is also, I don't want to get into the annexation part because I know that was a different part, but, really we need to know that we can afford to do this and keep the services at their current level that we have for current residents. And so we need to be completely assured that not just for the first phase, or not just for ongoing salaries once everything gets up and running, but really just the basics of, we need the building space, we need to know if we need another leaf truck, we need to know that we can afford that. We need to know that if something should happen and we need to bring some more services in-house, we can pay for that. So really just anticipating those needs, because I know this is what you all do for a living. This isn't new, you know? It's not like you build development and you don't realize what needs to happen in order to accommodate those extra people. So, you know, that I think also going with how Martha mentioned the civic and municipal space that had been talked about before, certainly looking into that as more of how can we address current town needs and the ones that will come with these extra folks. I think that, let's see, I'm trying to just look at things that haven't been brought up yet. You know, one thing about the PUD and traditional neighborhood development and the variety of things that you have talked about, you know, one of the words that kept coming up to me that's written in all these things are things like a higher quality product, you know, something that's going to really enhance the town. So that's what we need to see. How is this, again, a value add for the town? And, you know, how is this a bonus for the people who will live there? So, you know, not just having a bare minimum, but really how is that going to enhance things both for the residents of that community, but also for the wider community? And so an example to me for that would be, you know, I want the whole place to look good. Obviously, we want it to be beautiful and somewhere that everybody would like to be, but certainly, you know, on the borders and on the Guilford College Road and Mackey Road areas, it's most important that those look most like Jamestown or that would flow nicely. I know it's not going to look exactly like Jamestown. Not all Jamestown looks the same. But, you know, Sean Rogers did, with our Historic Society, did, you know, provide information at one of the planning board meetings, just giving kind of a little bit of history about the town, some photos and things like that. I know you all have done a good job with your amenity center. I really like how that was, the style of that was based on the hunting lodge that was original to the area. So I'd really want to see more of that, again, especially in those areas that are facing town. Again, what's inside should look good too, but definitely make those look good. I think that would go a long way with residents, both, you know, within Jamestown and ETJ. Let's see. Oh, and also, you spoke a little bit about this, which I was excited to hear more about, but, you know, making sure that there are age-in-place housing options. Those are an area where I think that, you know, it is appropriate to have smaller houses and smaller lot sizes. But just make sure that they are quality material, well-constructed. We have people who are in town who, you know, one of my main concerns over the years has been we have a lot of folks who maybe built their homes here, raised their families, and are now at a point where they're downsizing or wanting something smaller that's more appropriate to age in place. And it's almost like we kick them out because we don't have that. And so I feel like, you know, that is an area where Jamestown is losing people, and that could be a real value added to us and something great for you all, because I think you have a built-in population who would really want that within your community. And so I would definitely want to see more of that, you know, well-built, modest homes that are appropriate for age in place, and have those, I think, be closer to Guilford College Road. You know, with the planning board, I know it kind of moved around, but I feel like the Guilford College Mackey area would be more appropriate for that. And whether that be just a community that informally the houses are appropriate for that, or if it's, you know, truly a 55 and up or something community. I'm not sure the specifics of how that's done. But also for that to be in the earliest phase of the development, I think would be good, you know, because again, we are losing people who are moving away, and I think that's something where it would be a win-win for everybody to have that. And I get one other thing, just a variety of lot sizes and home sizes and styles. I think if there's a reason to have very small houses and very small lots, there are good reasons for that, but that's not appropriate for the entire acreage of that. That's a lot of homes. And especially the number of townhomes. I've heard a lot of concerns about, like, why so many townhomes? So I think that's it for me now.
Thank you. I do want to ask about one of your items in terms of anticipating the infrastructure needs and how those would be met. You know, just to make sure we all leave here without any false expectations, I don't know that we're the best suited to do that, because we don't know your existing, sanitation needs or your existing trash pickup frequency and,
Well, that would be
volume of
easy to
that.
find out. I mean, that's not a,
Right.
you all are doing a lot of research, and I think you're very good at it, so, that's just a question. But I think also, even if you only looked at your own community and, the population that you're anticipating there, you could see, what kind of needs there would be, averages and that type of thing. So I think there's a way to meet and discuss those things.
Certainly, and meeting and discussing sounds more, more palatable, just because that's a, your existing budget that the town spends on that, and what it is, what functionality level is precipitating that budget is stuff that's not known to us,
Well,
and would have to be.
There again, that might be where we would have to get an expert professional to help us. Staff could give them information, and a lot of that, that's going to take some work, because you're going to try to estimate what's the revenue going to be. Well, you can't do that until you lock down what's your density going to be, or, how many units they're going to be, and all these things. So, but I think it would have to be somebody who is on the support of the town to figure out that figure,
Yeah.
to give those figures.
I think as we get into it and we see what shape the development takes,
Yeah.
then certainly concerns that the town has would be, water supply. The most expensive thing is wastewater supply and what that does to the capacity that we have. We certainly can work on water and sewer issues, the streets, the sanitation, and once we kind of know what's there, then we can do a takeoff and work maybe with some special assistance from folks that we would use
Yeah.
to come up and anticipate the tax base, anticipate the sales tax, the POW bill funds, and then, then we've got a budget. We can look at salaries and staffing and, what we're going to do, and then it's a matter of here's the income coming in, and here's what it's going to cost to serve it at a level that is equivalent to what we're doing in town, and is it a sound economic decision, financial decision for the town to be able to do that? And I know the developer's going to have to do that on their side, but, we can certainly facilitate communication with fire. We can talk to Guilford County, on the police protection, which we contract for. And so, and once we know what we have, working collaboratively to come up for the board, that information, but right now it would be difficult for us to do that until we can see what shape this is going to take.
Yeah.
And I probably should have prefaced, some of this came from, there was that space on the corner, well, there is the space on the corner that had been designated potentially municipal use, or, and then it turned out, one of the last planning board meetings, someone from a church, he described it as a church plant that is currently across from Furniture Land South, that area had been offered to that particular church, and he gave reasons why this would, essentially meet the spiritual needs of people in Jamestown. I'm just asking that some of those practical needs, even if the exact numbers aren't specified, that, you would know there are going to be some municipal burdens on a community of our size if there's the expectation that we expand this much. And so instead of promising perhaps land that at one point had been, told to staff in Jamestown that might be available for municipal use, and then it is offered to, an outside group for another use, I would like to see more thinking of, okay, well, what are Jamestown's needs, even if they're not very, super specific with a dollar amount, but, I mean, anyone could see, if you grow that much, their anticipated needs, and how, as a developer, what could we do in that could perhaps make the rest of our plan more palatable, or at least answer the questions that our plan is going to create.
And the nexus of that discussion is a, how do we get here, or a do we do it at all? in terms of the growth of Jamestown?
I think, to me, identifying space, let us figure out what public needs we're going to have, and then determining what in the plan, what space might be available. If we need a fire substation or a fire station, we could say, this is going to, if we're doubling the size, we may need to have additional fire service contract. We may need a new facility. And is there a piece of land that we could put something like that on, within the development that would serve not only that area, but the rest of the community? So, and we talk about open space, if we want greenways or if we want parks or what, in other words, what kind of things are we going to need? And then is there space in the development to help us do that? Now, that's normally the kind of thing that you collaborate and negotiate, if you will. But you're exactly right. Let's line it up with what we need, and then make sure that the full value and benefit can accrue back to the town, and not have something and then we have to go in and duplicate something more costly.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. And then another one you mentioned happens to be another great example, I think, of where we got a little circular at Planning Board. You talked about, the perimeters of this project at most importance need to be well transitioned and need to look like they're not out of left field. Is that, and I'm not expecting you to answer this tonight collectively, but is that the preference, so that we do focus on a really cool community where you want to see that? You want to see those edges and you want to see how it transitions in? Or is it the preference to berm and buffer and space that thing so much that you never know it's back there? And that I think was a circular discussion that we got caught in at Planning Board and, never really got a great answer of. And so I think that speaks to, and I bring that up just to highlight the kinds of very threshold decisions we need to make about what type of community y'all want to see here, so that we can dive into, okay, how do we buffer it and hide it, or how do we transition it well so that it looks like Jamestown, but also looks like, a step towards something new?
I think it may depend on the area. So for example, you do have the commercial space, which obviously you're not going to want to berm and buffer away. So that, and at that intersection, places where people are entering and exiting Jamestown, especially, by the Welcome to Jamestown sign, anything you can see, I think should be very much in line with town. Now, as far as, do you berm and buffer the homes and everything? I think that's a conversation that, the whole group will need to have. But to me, especially those areas that are entry points to town, should look like town. It shouldn't, you shouldn't be confused as to where you are.
Well, that's something, I would like to have an expert to help us, because like I said, there's so many different ways to design something. I felt like the planning board wanted a heavy buffer. They wanted heavy screening. Sitting back listening to it, now you were at it, and you were at it, so, but you sound like you're confused. But I was confused from what I was hearing. So they wanted that 50-foot buffer, and you wanted the berm, and you wanted the trees on top of it. And, and I think the commercial needed to be on the interior, which you had done that to some degree, I think. I think the whole thing needs to look good, whether you see it or not. When you go in that area, when you go in that development, it needs, needs to be awesome. It's not, you say, well, if I don't see it, it doesn't matter. I don't agree with that at all. But like Whittington Hall has the berms and the trees, so you hardly see there's a swimming pool and there's a tennis court, both on Guilford Road, and you hardly see the swimming pool. And I have to look for the tennis courts. Now I look for them all the time, and I see them but beforehand I did not. So I think that goes along with what we have done is with the screening.
Okay, and I think your point is well taken, that there's a lot of frontage, and doesn't need to be one size fits all. Maybe there's a few ways to weave it together so that it looks, you know, like everywhere else. When you drive down a mile, you see different treatments, and maybe this should be no different. Maybe it should be site-specific.
And I don't know, there was it 6 house plans or 6 different house illustrations in there? I think it was 6, which I wasn't crazy about any of them. I'm sorry, I hate to be so critical, but I didn't really like any of them. But would the plan be, you're going to build just those 6 types only? And if that's the only plans you're going to build and you keep repeating them, then that's not going to look good. It's going to look like it's all the same. Because so I guess what I was getting at, most of the developments that I recall from Jamestown, the developer developed the land, did the roads and the infrastructure, but then sold to different builders. And builders did custom homes or they did spec homes. But so you have, when you go through, you do not see a repeat of the single-family homes, which I think that's the charm. Townhomes you do, and I agreed with the planning board. I think our current ordinance is 6 buildings, 6 units per building is the max. But they said they preferred 4, but they would accept 6. I would hope you would have your majority being 4 units and maybe a 6, 1 or 2 buildings. But I guess they kept talking about variety. And that's what I was getting out of it, that it seemed so uniform. There was just these few plans, every lot's going to be this size, or at least that's how it was conveyed.
Yeah, and I think that is exactly what I was talking about, where there was a breakdown in the ability to really meaningfully articulate how that was going to be avoided.
Well, that's what
Because
I'm
we
trying
didn't.
to ask you now, yeah.
Well, to really do it, we're going to need to know what
Well,
we're building.
then-
But to answer
then
your
that-
question,
My
no.
answer to that was we're going to need some support to help us give you
Give you,
that.
okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. But to answer your question, no, I mean, we don't even have a builder signed up, so certainly we're not going, okay, it's these 6 houses and we're gonna, pluck them down and that's it. What we were trying to do was illustratively show 6 examples of what the commitments we had put in text in that book, how that could manifest. And these were 6 ways that an architect we had draw it up, came up with. But no, it was never intended to be
That this is going to be all there is.
yeah, no, it wasn't meant to be like a, hey, come in the model home and pick one of these 6.
Right.
That was a lot of the way it was interpreted by a lot of people.
I agree. I
Just-
think
just as a heads
there
up.
was a lot of misunderstanding about that, and we can do a better job, I think. I think
Well,
that's
and
what,
that's why I think if this board has some support, it can help us help you on
Well,
clarifying some of those
okay.
things.
I hear you. And then, I think since we've heard from everyone, and the thing I heard from each of you was density,
Yeah.
I'd like to, and not that, I understand, but I do want to drill down a little bit. Is it a matter of, sticker shock density when you see a number that starts with a 1 in front of it? Or is it a matter of when you look at the bird's eye view and the mass of lots that you see? Or is it a matter of, when I do the math on Whittington Hall, it equals 2.5, and when I do this math, it equals 2.9? What is the driving force there? Because I think that will help us determine, how we break this up in meaningful ways so that we have density in small lots where it makes sense, and where we don't do that when we're not giving a reason or a value add to do so.
I think that just to get out in front of some of that, I think a lot of people are very visual, and the people I've talked to all talk about the optics of what this is going to look like, and they're worried about it being somehow cookie cutter with the lots being so small that things are really kind of packed in. It ties back in with the 6 house models, because the inference was we're going to see the same houses all the way down. And if you want a good example of that, go to Fox Hollow over on the other side of the property, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I know I used to live there a long time ago. So I think that really, I'm not saying that's the only thing, but the feedback I've gotten has been very much about the optics and what is this thing going to look like when it's starting to evolve. And so when you start making those lots smaller and smaller, we say density because it's the thing that ties it all together, but that's a big piece of it. And my peers may have a different opinion, but that's what I've heard.
The one thing I keep hearing over and over, in addition to everything that's been said here, and I've checked off my list of things that I've been hearing, is the variety of the housing types and the variety of housing sizes. That what we felt like we've looked at is they're all within a 300 square foot house, and that there need to be some different varieties in there, because if someone's going to want to live in Jamestown, they may not always want to live in that starter home or the age-appropriate home. There's something in the middle for them, too.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that it's not density in a strict definition of the word density. It's more, well, make it make sense to me.
There's,
I've heard-
Get rid of that word density.
Well, I think,
Yeah,
I mean, if I'm-
I can't walk away from that, no ma'am.
I'm not trying to walk back either, but I do think that, you know, from where you're going with this, I believe that there is, for lack of a better way of putting it, and I'm not trying to be rude about it, but a lack of creative interpretation of what's been presented
right,
that leads to people being concerned, so immediately they see houses being packed on top of each other. I don't discount that, you know, it may still be, the number's too high, but I think that that's one piece of it that keeps playing back in, to Lynn's point, to Martha's point, to Rebecca's point.
and maybe the way to ask this is to frame it so that you don't have to walk away from the whole word. That, you know, even, is it true, is it an accurate statement, that even if you saw the most, you know, award-winning, knock your socks off, architect, planner, blessed plan that the world has ever seen, but it still was 1,200 units, you're not going to be okay with that because of just the fact that you think 1,200 is too much for Jamestown? Or is it more accurate to say, well, show me how you're going to do that in a way that fits our community, and we'll think about it?
Well, and that's why I said, and I don't want to keep repeating myself.
Yeah.
But I said, yes, if I had some support, someone for our board looking out and could show me maybe some architectural renderings and how it's really going to play out,
Okay,
maybe, but right now, tonight, I think it's too many units.
okay. And
But there's, like we talked about, there's different ways to develop things and how it will be shown, the look and the feel of it.
sure,
But I still come back to, and I'm with the planning board, that I felt like there was too many units and they were too small and the lots were too small. I remember one comment, and whether it's true or not, but in the meeting said that the plans, the houses that were in the plan couldn't even fit on the lots because the lots were too small.
and I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that, and that might have been, again,
But-
because of the illustrative,
But
yeah.
Yeah, and then, of course, we can, and I really didn't want to, like I said, I think it's a waste of time to go and talk about the garage doors, and for me, maybe to talk to you about, I'm more of a fan of a raised slab. I don't like, on grade slab. Or for me to say, I think it needs to be 75% brick and masonry for the whole subdivision, and it needs to be 75% of each house needs to be brick, instead of just the front up to halfway up. I mean, I think it's a waste of time for us
I agree.
to get into that tonight, because I think we've all gone over what's the major things, and I've gone over what I think I need as a board member to make an informed decision is some support. But I think it needs to happen quickly. I'm not wanting to drag it out. I'm not trying to run y'all around. I'm really trying to make a good informed decision to help you and help us.
Okay.
But I don't know, that's going to be up to our interim town manager, our planning director, to maybe seek out these people that we need to
Okay.
give us advice.
And is
I think
that,
You've also heard, I mean, this is repetitive. We're saying the same things that you've heard in multiple
Yeah.
meetings.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea of what, everybody wants to see in the town, just my opinion. And I don't think that we've had any earth-shattering information tonight that's going to help you go back and redraw anything. We need to get
Yeah.
our ducks in a row with Martha's suggestion and go from that aspect as well. Because all we're going to do is just keep going back to the same things
Yeah.
over and over and over. But you've heard dozens of times and gotten emails from other people
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
We are their voice, and that's what we're saying, exactly what you've already heard.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I'm not trying to belabor anything or waste your time tonight. I guess just when, I hear across the board density, and that is an expansive word, especially when you're talking about 450 acres. I just want to, I think that there is a comfort level that we can walk away from each other tonight with in knowing that, we each know the work we're going to go do when we leave this room. And when we come back having done that work, it's not going to be in vain just because the number is still X or what, I think what I'm hearing y'all say is that we don't know yet. We need to see, we need to understand, we need to engage other experts. And to me, that's good news, because it's not you saying, listen, anything you bring me that is X number, we're never going to look at.
Can I ask
I
a
think that's-
question about the density part? When you make that number, when you sit down and do the algebra or whatever it takes to actually get that number, are you taking the 443 acres and then saying I've got X amount of homes and that's my density per acre? Or are you taking out in your equation all those streams, all the natural areas, all that area that's not going to be developed, and then giving us that number? Or is it
No, they
the
do it
first
on
time?
gross.
It's the former, and the reason is because that is what your ordinance prescribes, and that allows you to have an apples-to-apples comparison when you compare it to other developments, and you call Mr. Johnson and say, hey, what's the density of Whittington Hall, and he gives you a number, then you're going to know that it was calculated the same way our number was, as opposed to net, where you would back all that stuff out.
Okay.
And it's also, just from a planning principle, because of the fact that the idea, the concept is that if you have, greater open space and greater common area, then there's a reciprocated benefit to having a smaller lot. It's not going to be for everyone, but some people like that idea of I have less to worry about and maintain, but I get the benefit of these huge corridors and open fields and community gardens.
Would it be fair to say, though, that a lot of developments don't have as much open space as what this one would have, or undeveloped space?
Absolutely, and that's a feature of the T&D more innovative design, because, when we were building subdivisions in the 80s and 90s, that was not the prevailing development pattern. It was give everyone the biggest yard that they can have, that they can own on their deed.
So
And
given
now
that,
we've kind of,
the figure would be a little different. It would be looked at different if this isn't the norm as far as the amount of acreage that's not going to be developed, then it's not the
apples to
same as
apples.
what prior calculations would be. It is something different. You can't compare it to Whittington Hall.
Right, I think what we've talked about is that the T&D hasn't been done before. It's not prescribed for anywhere else, so you're right, it would be different. But I think what you'd be able to ask yourself is, okay, these numbers were calculated the same way, and this one is this much less than Whittington Hall. Am I comfortable that there's enough payoff for that? Is this neighborhood getting enough in all the other things to make me okay with that?
Right. I just want a clarification. on
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Amanda, is there anything that you would like to throw out to us as being something that you would like us to add to our list of things to do to get you information? Is there anything, a specific item
I appreciate
you have a
that.
question on?
I don't think so. I mean, I think everyone's.
I bet it's density.
That is- Well, yeah, I've spent a lot of time drilling down on that. I just want to understand that we're not all banging our heads against a wall in vain. I think, I think it's important to know that we're working towards a plan that substantiates it and justifies it, I think is what I'm hearing y'all tell me. So no, I think, I think this has been good. As you think of things, please feel free to email it to me so that we don't have to wait 30 days. I'm always willing to, take it over email, and then we can address it here. We don't have to have a side email conversation, but that'll help me be prepared. Or if you come across another Weldon Village, or if it's not Weldon Village, if it's something else that you want to say, hey, Amanda, go drive over to Winston and check this out. Please shoot that stuff my way. And the other last thing would just be to please, as you go out and your town manager engages these professionals for you, just keep me apprised. And, our schedule is such that we will make it a priority to be able to be at those meetings, when y'all are available and your experts are available so that we can accomplish something on that front before February 16th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
This time we'll open the public hearing to the public. Is there anyone that would like to speak on this issue?
I didn't understand, but now it's.
Sorry.
Katie has a one-page presentation, to give you afterward. Tom Turbo, I live in Whittington Hall, have lived there for over 20 years. My vision to share with you all is that why not, if this is supposed to be a part of Jamestown, make it an extension of Jamestown. Whittington Hall and Cedarwood are right adjacent. And so rather than creating any kind of a community, a separate community, if you will, on the Johnson farm, you extend them. And I offer that Whittington Hall as a great model. I've listed, for your reading pleasure, a lot of the things that I believe keep Whittington Hall completely occupied. Houses very rarely lose their value. They don't lose their value, and they sell quickly. And so rather than creating a rival satellite, I've given you some features, 2 things that it doesn't have for your consideration: public sidewalks and speed control on the long, mainly the long street. There's only one really long street in there, which is Winrow Drive. So what I'd like you to consider are the merits of my write-up. And by the way, Whittington Hall has about 100 homes on 130 acres. Just to tell you, it's not like we have 1-acre lots. We do not. But there's a lot of natural area that has been left so that you get great privacy. Another thing that I will, and so house size matters, obviously. If I'm downsizing, I don't need 5 bedrooms. But a 2-car garage is a great, great item that I would insist on every home here for storage, if nothing else. So I would then take the pool area, our recreation area, and enlarge it proportionately for however many houses fit in the final plan. And I'd add a community center. Don't have one there, but a community center for a development like that can be used for HOA meetings and parties, can be rented out. And I'd add a basketball court, but no baseball diamonds. Baseball diamonds are used on weekends. That's it. And so it's wasted space, period. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Katie has the cliff notes.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Keep it on.
Hi, my name is Laura Catherine Fuqua. I live at 101 Mendenhall Road, Jamestown. Most of you guys all know me. You know what I'm going to say, and you know where I stand. So I'll make it short, sweet, to the point, and so that this 2.5-hour meeting can hopefully end if we can all go home. For over 14 months, we've been discussing this. We've heard promises, we've seen projects, and also I want to say this, I made this statement before the beginning of the meeting, so some of it has changed. We've been hearing the same thing for over a year now. We've all been going back and forth. You guys have all been sitting in a lot of long meetings. And to be perfectly honest, I feel like we haven't gotten anywhere. I feel like we're all kind of just sitting. We're still hearing the same thing over and over again, and I guess I'm going to go ahead and go back to the word at hand, density. It's too dense. I'm a product of Guilford County Public Schools. I am the product of 2 administrators for Guilford County Public Schools, one of which who could not be here tonight because he's coaching a basketball game. You cannot cram this many kids into those schools and it be fair. With the proposal that this developer has a history of developing, they are slabs of concrete stacked together next to each other, and they pack them in like sardines, and it is not fair to the kids. The density is too high. Obviously, the public and developers across the board have a different definition of high quality. I don't consider any type of home that is a cookie cutter in vision to be high quality. It's just not. In Jamestown, when I think of it, I think of custom-built large lots that has a unique character to themselves. If I was gonna live somewhere that everything looked the same, I would have moved to Adams Farm. Bottom line. If the proposed zoning is changed with the way that this developer wants it, what do we, the citizens of Jamestown who have lived here for years, have to get out of it? And question goes to you guys. Y'all are also residents here. Other than the town gaining tax dollars, what are we gonna get out of this? Right now, in November of 2020, the town of Medben told the developer to go take his toys and play in a different sandbox. I would highly recommend that unless the new PUD proposal has strict, detailed wording, and everything is held to the line item, that this town council also tell this developer to go play in a different sandbox. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. At this point, I believe we probably want to continue this hearing. Do I have a motion?
Sure, I would make a motion to continue this public hearing on the rezoning request to February 16th meeting without further advertisement.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Okay. Ross, would you like to give us a golf report?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to talk about the second quarter report for the golf course. And just like first quarter, we continue to see rounds increase over last year, same quarter last year. We roughly did about 2,000 more rounds of golf for second quarter than we did last year. So obviously with that many more people, that obviously increases our revenue. I think our revenue was up with green fee, cart fee, and range about 50%. Merchandising revenue was up. Food and beverage was up a little. We continue to do takeout only through the grill. The dining area is closed. And of course, we are not renting the clubhouse still at this point due to COVID restrictions. So we did miss out on some holiday parties. So we have covered the greens once this winter so far, December 23rd through the 27th. And just one quick little number, I did rounds of golf, total rounds for 2019. We're at a little over 29,000, and total rounds for 2020 was a little over 27,000 total rounds. So after being closed for 6 weeks, that was,
Yeah.
we made up a lot of ground.
It's pretty good.
So that was good. So I think that's all I have. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Well, that was one thing I was going to ask, was how the greens are,
Greens are great.
and if they were being covered up when it's the cold nights, because it's gotten cold now in the 20s.
Absolutely.
Nice.
You know, the most common question you see, it's going to be 25 degrees tonight. Do we have to cover the greens? Is not really the case.
Okay.
You know, it's a lot of factors. Consecutive,
Yeah.
long periods of coldness is when we have to do it. So, yeah, definitely protect our greens, for sure.
Yeah, and we've got the people to cover them.
Yes,
All right,
we do.
all right.
We do.
Any other questions for us?
All right, thank y'all.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ross.
Thank you, Ross.
Matthew, the hazard mitigation plan proposal.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Guilford County is in the process of updating their hazard mitigation plan. And like I say in the packet, it's a multi-jurisdictional plan which seeks to comply with the Disaster Mitigation, that should be Act of 2000. The DMA emphasizes the need for state, local, and tribal governments to closely coordinate on disaster mitigation planning activities. It makes the development of the mitigation plan a requirement for any jurisdiction which applies for federal mitigation grant funding. The state of North Carolina also requires that the plan be in place to qualify for state funding following state-declared disasters. So essentially, the plan is something that Guilford County updates from time to time. They want to make sure that we still qualify for state and federal funding in the event that we need to have that. Hopefully not, but you have any specific questions about the plan? It's 500 pages, roughly 500 pages big.
Well, I remember when I was on the committee we first did it, so they renew it every 5 years.
Right.
And so it was renewed last done in 2015, and so it's just time for that to be updated. So, I mean, yeah, I 100%, and Guilford County Emergency Services, they're the lead agency on it, and they do a terrific job. So.
They do a very good job.
Yeah.
Paul and I were talking about this. I think he and Kenny and I attended those meetings. It's been a year or two ago. It's been with COVID, everything seems like forever ago.
I know, yeah, yeah.
Basically the same wording on the resolution as 5 years ago.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I would make a motion to approve the resolution adopting the Guilford County Hazard Mitigation Plan as presented.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Judy, budget amendment number 15.
Okay. So, Town Council wishes to pay out a one-time bonus of $1,000 to Matthew Johnson, Assistant Town Manager, for his service during the time period when the town manager position was vacant. So I would need you to approve for that, allow that to be paid out, and then to approve budget amendment number 15, which would increase the salary budget as well as the FICA and retirement.
Is that all one motion, or is it
Is that one motion?
one motion?
Yes.
Okay, motion to approve the payout of the bonus and also to approve budget amendment 15.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your hard work while we're reorganizing. I appreciate it.
What Martha said.
Okay, we'll have the manager's report. Thank you.
Yep, so from now on, you'll be hearing from Dave. And I don't know that we took a minute to welcome Dave, but I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Dave Treem, who's been with us a little over a week now. And we've thrown him into the deep end, and we are doing a good job of indoctrinating him in everything in Jamestown. So we're going to get him some shirts here soon.
There you go.
Let's see here. January 22nd, that's this Friday at 9 a.m., we'll be having the budget retreat at the Golf Course Pro Shop. In regards to 301 Lee Street, Beth and I have been working with D.H. Griffin to get that on the schedule. They're still waiting for the results of the asbestos test to come back. With Oakdale Cotton Mill, just a quick update. We've been in conversation with Preservation NC about this for a couple months now. There are some interested parties, and we are trying to investigate
what it would take to get an appraisal of the cotton mill property. Preservation NC did suggest that perhaps the town might be interested in getting that appraisal done, so we would have a basis for starting the conversation. They did suggest that there is a limited number of people that understand how to do those appraisals, because as you can imagine, finding comps for those is not easy. I did reach out. I'm waiting to hear back from an appraiser to see if I can get an idea on what that cost is. So we may be bringing that up to you in February. Just wanted to give you a heads up that that's coming down the pipeline.
Well, has the owner thought about getting an appraisal?
There was some discussion of the owner getting an appraisal at one point. In our conversations with them, they decided that stalled. So I'm going to get an idea of what it costs to do that, to see if that's something that we would like to explore or not.
Yeah.
So,
I would just be afraid that, I mean, if it's very affordable, I think we can have that conversation, but just as far as consistency, across the town, when is it appropriate to do that and when not? And I know that with the Johnson property we've been speaking about, we've had a number of residents, or, at least I've heard from residents saying, well, how come you don't call in people to make up a plan? Why doesn't the town pay for that they could then use, that perhaps potential developers want? And I have to explain, well, that's not the town's job. It's a privately owned,
Yeah.
number of acreage. So I would just want to make sure, whether it's because of a historic designation or something else like that, that we can very clearly explain why this is appropriate for the town to pay for this in this situation. But, wouldn't be, we're not going to go and get an appraisal for somebody else's property.
absolutely understood.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
And could we be reimbursed for that, for that appraisal when the property did sell?
Absolutely, good question. Very valid. We'll double check on all of those. I don't even know, again, it could be very affordable, it could be cost prohibitive. We
But we
want to
still want
explore
to
the
be
option
reimbursed.
first and see.
Yeah.
I'm just letting you know that we are continuing to work on the cotton mill.
Okay.
The golf maintenance building, Paul and Dave will be working together to sort of figure out what the next steps for that building will be. You're probably going to hear a little bit more about that on Friday during the budget retreat. Just didn't want you to think that it slipped our minds. Sidewalk along East Main, again, February is an anticipated date for completion. As you can see, most of it has been done. There's a small section that hasn't. Paul's been dealing with the railroad, and they've been very good to deal with. They've been very kind, but it's just taking a little bit of time to work through that process. They've asked Paul to make some changes. DOT had asked for those changes, and the railroad is trying to actually ask us to pay a fee. And we feel like, because it's at the request of DOT, that that should not apply to us. And that tentatively has been agreed to by the railroad, but they are running it up the chain of command there. So I just want to let you know, we're still working on that.
Have they worked out the washout issues?
Say that again?
Have they worked out the washout?
The washout issues. Paul, did you want to address that for?
Yeah.
So for those of you who might not have heard at home, that is what he is referring to with the railroad. So I'm just saying it for the microphone. And then finally, the sidewalk along East Fork Road, there's a couple of punch list items that they're working through. We should be pretty close to being done with that. So,
Well, I saw they moved the portalette, so I assume that.
yes. Usually when the portable toilets leave, that's a good indication we're getting
The
close.
job's done. Yeah.
Good sign.
Thank you all very much. If you have any
Jump
questions.
back to Lee Street. The word says structures. Is the garage going as well, or just the house?
Not at this time.
Beth and I have been talking about that. I'm going to let Beth address that if you don't mind.
Sure, at this point, we're just going for the house. That's the main eyesore over there. The garage is still subject to our order of demolition,
Right.
but the house is in our opinion, the immediate need at this point.
Agreed.
Thank you. Anything else? Thanks. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, do we have any committee reports?
Amen.
We did not have a TAC meeting in December. We will have our next one January 26th, next week.
Nothing on your end? Okay, we'll go to Wynn with his high school report.
So Ragsdale has been remote learning for the entirety of the 2020 school year so far, and will stay that way until at least February 15th for high schools. We were supposed to go back today, actually, but with cases from the pandemic still being high, Ragsdale has decided to follow the Guilford County mandate and delay the start. The school day for the second semester has also moved from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock with a 1-hour lunch break to 10 o'clock to 4:25 with a half-hour lunch break. And despite this, some athletic seasons are wrapping up now, and the spring sports, with the addition of football, are beginning practice this week and in the coming weeks, as well as clubs have been meeting remotely. That's all I've got. If you have any questions.
Well, how have you liked that? How is it?
The remote
okay
learning?
with the remote learning?
It's been different from a social aspect. It's
Yeah.
definitely a little more difficult to communicate with teachers and kind of, there's not the hands-on approach. It's been fine, but the communication's obviously a little slower than being face-to-face.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, and we'd also like to offer our congratulations on earning the rank of Eagle Scout.
Thank you. Thank you guys for your approval.
Katie, do we have anyone signed out for public comment period?
Nobody signed up.
Okay. Council, do you have any other business you would like to address?
Not a thing.
I think a lot has been said.
Okay. With nothing more to address, do I have a motion to
Motion to
adjourn?
adjourn.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.